Hey, what's happening, everybody? Welcome to the program. It is the Jeff Gerstmann Show. It is a podcast about video games, and it is December 31st, New Year's Eve Day. New Year's Eve Day? The day of New Year's Eve here in beautiful California. In some places of the world, it is already 2025. Weird. I don't know how that works. I know it's 795 beats here in the time, with the time that matters. It's 795 beats. So I don't know. When we celebrate the new year, when we're on Swatch internet time, do we just, so when it is straight up triple zeros, is that what we want to do here? Is that what we want to celebrate the new year? That's like, what is that? I want to say that was like noon here or something like that, but I forget the Swatch internet time translate. No, it was like 333 was midnight, I think is what it was. And anyway, many conversions to be done in the new year, because I do not see the rest of the world wisening up, smartening up, and adapting a universal time standard such as Swatch internet time. You know, I think we've got at least one more year of this bullshit. When it's 12 p.m. here and it's 3 p.m. here, and what does that even mean? It's all a construct, man. We need to get back to what matters, and that's one world time. Phantasy Star Online. That's it, and that's all. I actually do kind of miss daylight savings time. We are out of daylight savings time right now, and it gets dark kind of early, and I don't necessarily like that. I like it when it's lighter later. Because sometimes you got to get outside, and you're like, oh man, it's like 5 o'clock and it's pitch black. This is not how it's supposed to be, man. This is not the life I was promised. But we'll see how it all shake out. There's all this talk about like, oh, we're gonna get rid of daylight savings, but actually by getting rid of it, they mean we're just gonna be on it all the time, which I might be kind of into. I don't know, but it's time sucks. Here we are at the end of the year. It's you try to reflect on the year that was, and try to figure out like some way to like wrap it all out. Well, it was a year of this and that, and we have some emails and stuff that are trying to kind of figure all that out too. And I don't know that I have a good clean answer, a good clean wrap up for the year. It was brutal in a lot of ways, I guess, is maybe if you had to sum it up in a word. There's been a brutality to the game industry here over the last, longer than 12 months, but all of the jobs lost, all of the, questionable decisions made and everything. And then you look at it and you're like, well, consumer spending was basically flat. And so you're like, well, all right, so what does that mean? And trying to parse all of those things. But yeah, kind of a brutal year overall. Of course, that's always separated from the quality of the actual shipping games. In fact, it feels like more often than not when we're talking about how, messed up a year maybe has been, it's always cut with like, but the games were fantastic. And you're like, yeah, I think that's a constant. I think that, as long as you know where to look, and as long as you're open to a variety of games, it will always be a good year for games, because there's always going to be a lot of things coming out all the time. I saw some number that was said that like 19,000 games got published to Steam this year, and then that's like a record high. That's not a That's a terrifying concept because certainly not all 19,000 of those games are good. And it's, that's kind of when we get into this like awards season thing. It's always the dumbest thing about the like worst game awards that people give, because they always give it to something that's like way too high pro. Like the worst game that came out this year, no one played it. It was played by like 2 people, and one of them was the developer's like best friend, and it's on Steam somewhere. And there will be people with the worst game to come out this year was Conquered, and you're like, no, like Conquered's not. Nothing wrong with it per se, just not a very good game. Like the conversations around worst game are always terrible. And so that's why I always tried to center it around like the worst game we played, because it's there's something more honest about that, and acknowledging like, hey, like the worst game that came out this year, someone made it in 20 minutes and threw it up on itch and no one saw it, and or just some broken thing, like there's a ton of different things that are way worse than I don't know, Suicide Squad, not a good game. Also, that didn't come out this year, did it? Dude, it's a blur. Did Suicide Squad, now I need to know, did the Suicide Squad game come out this calendar year? That was last year, right? Let's look. We're loading up. We're saying, yes, we can see. Oh, that wasn't indeed this year, February 2nd. So that's not a good game. I'd go so far as to say that's a bad game in terms of, just what you do in that game and how it plays and the repetition and everything. Like, there's a lot of stuff about that game that is certainly not good. But it doesn't mean it's the worst game that came out this year. Is it one of the worst games I played this year? Yeah, probably. If we were doing a ranking of 10 or 5 or something like that, like Suicide Squad probably makes that cut. But I think that just goes so far as, that all that says is, I didn't dig deep enough in search of the worst video games, Yeah, was that Gollum game? That Gollum game was last year. That had to have been. Lord of the Rings Gollum, $10 on Steam. Yeah, that was May of last year. That was May of last year. There was a fighting game with famous people in it that came out that some guy made, and it's really god awful. That might actually be the worst game. Celebrity Combat, I think it's called. Let me look. I feel gross even like acknowledging it in a way that like might lead to other people looking at it, but I meant to stream it and just never got around to it. It's Celebrity Combat with a K. So if you are on the Warner Brothers legal team, let me tell you, there's someone out here using combat with a K in a game. But also that's not it's got The Rock in it as like whatever his superhero, Black Adam or whatever the hell it is. And it's just like, I don't know where these assets came from. It doesn't, it's a ridiculous mess, but like, I'm looking at a title screen here that is, oh yeah, Mark Zuckerberg is in it. Jay-Z and Kanye West are apparently in it. John Wick is in it. Beyonce is in it. Shakira is in it. Yeah, so it's a weird. That came out last June, though. That is also not a 2024 game. But I was exposed to it in 2024, and that is actually probably the worst game I played in this calendar year. It's real bad. It's real bad. But where does gaming go from here, I guess, is the question everyone at least wants to ask. I don't think there's a really good clean answer to that right now. I think that there's an aspect of this, like, we're not done with the brutality. I feel fairly certain that, we're going to come back from, or well, to come back from, tomorrow was January, but like people are going to come back to work and it's going to be bad immediately for some folks. And but you see little signs of, like, I think if you're watching this stuff closely, I think there's like signs of adjustment. I was going to say hope, but what I really mean is, like, I think the industry is going to continue to make adjustments, and they've learned some things this year. The thing about trends and the way they change is it always takes a while, right? Like, if a game is hot and people want to make clones of it, those games get into production as the game is shipping, and that takes a long time for that trend to realize. And it's true on the other end as well. Like, when developers see, like, hey, chasing after the kind of Fortnite money, the live service game money is much more difficult than we ever thought it was going to be, and maybe we don't need to invest in quite as many of those. I think that's a lesson that parts of the industry started to learn over the course of this year because of just how brutal some of these situations have been. So as a result, I think, when you look at this stuff, it will take time for that stuff to kind of get flushed out of the system, it'll, like, for it to kind of, not be the trend anymore, and for developers to try to move on to something else. But, that's not the situation we saw this year. We saw games like Conquered that were struggling to try, like, they to be clear, Conquered was not a live service game in the traditional sense, because they were, they came out near the end, and maybe this was not the case all along. Like, maybe this was their last ditch effort. Maybe they kind of knew, they're like, hey, if we're going to get a player base, we need to not nickel and dime people. We need to try to figure this out, or and so maybe I bet they went back and forth on a lot of the, what are they going to do? Are they going to do a season pass? They can do this, they can do that. There's like those sorts of situations. But that game failed immediately, and probably shouldn't have shipped in the first place. But what's the lesson learned there? The lesson learned there is that, if you're making a multiplayer only game, you have to be damn sure that people are going to play it, because otherwise, if matchmaking times are long your week of launch, which they were in Concord's case, if there's already questions about the number of people playing your game, like, that word spreads. The word of mouth on that is a killer. No one's going to buy a game if it already kind of has the stink on it of, like, well, no one's playing it. And if, and in most cases, who cares, right? You're like, oh, well, I'll just buy it anyway and I'll play it. But in a game that is multiplayer only, or in a game that is a free-to-play live service game, even in some of these cases, you're going to go like, well, I'm not going to download it. It sounds like it's already on its way out anyway. And that ends up having something of a snowball effect. And, there you go. It's, interesting to watch all that stuff happen. We had Marvel Rivals come out pretty late in the year here, and people seem to really like it. I've seen complaints around the edges about, ranked games, and the people not playing their classes properly, and all of that stuff in ranked games, which that's a tale as old as time. That's not unique to that game, and it's really just a sign that they didn't solve that problem either, and no one really has. I don't know. It's still, it's nice that game exists. I don't want to play it at all. I have like I could not have less interest in a game than I have in Marvel Rivals. You're like, all right, we made another Overwatch style game, but this time it's got all your favorite comic book heroes. I'm like, yeah, dude, no thanks, man. Like zero interest. I played a few matches of that beta and looked at it. I was like, yep, yeah, you sure did do that. You sure did make exactly that. And I have no room in my life for that game. But, but it's been wildly successful, so that's cool. If people seem like they're into it, I mean, it seems like there's definitely space for that right now, especially with all of the complaints about where Overwatch has been. Like, It seems like that in some ways it, like it could have shipped 6 months sooner and people would have maybe been a little bit more angry about Overwatch then or whatever. But like the state of Overwatch and people being fed up with it seems like a real, that's opportunity for a competitor, and they shipped and took advantage of that quite well, I suppose. Through not necessarily through any kind of devious. It's not like they shipped like, we are gonna wait for the maximum weakness in Overwatch and then we're gonna exploit. It's like, no, they just made that game, and people were unhappy with that game on the other side, and there you go. Massholt says now everyone's chasing Genshin Impact. Yeah, totally. I mean, Genshin Impact is chasing Genshin Impact, and they've got their own competitors to that, or games that live alongside it that they themselves have published, and you have a lot of, I look at that as like, Genshin Impact I think really blew open the door. You'd already maybe seen some examples of this to a certain extent, but really Genshin Impact really, I think, proved that you can take a lot of those mobile game concepts and bring them to PC and console, and there's an audience of people that will eat it up there too. And in fact, they may appreciate it more because, the things you're going to need to do on the production end to make your game look great and make your game play well, in comparison to some of the other games that are out there on those platforms. Like they're honing in on the perfect killer, like the ultimate predator. Genshin Impact was most of the way there. Like, the people that didn't get, maybe Zenless Zone Zero sucked them in, or maybe Honkai Star Rail was maybe more their cup of tea, kind of different cuts of the same concepts worked into different genres of game so that they can try to get as many of you as possible. And now we have Infinity Nikki, the ultimate realization of this concept. No, I don't know. But like that was, I think Genshin Impact was almost a little scary in a way when it came out, because it felt like this moment of, oh shit, they realized that they need to make a good game too, because there'd been a lot of attempts at bringing the mobile style games, and whether it was gacha games or the games that kind of were the big free to play games before the gacha style really took hold. But you had multiple developers trying to bring these concepts to the West. And, they did live on phones and, but you wouldn't have friends that were obsessed with those games on phones the way it seems like you do now. That those games are available across multiple platforms, and they've just gotten a lot better and nicer to look at and all of this stuff. And it's really, I don't know, I'm really of like a couple of minds about it. It's in some ways, it's great that there are games that are available out there for $0 that have some production shops behind them and are fun to play in a variety of spaces. That's something we've said about Fortnite and some other free-to-play games that have blown up in the West. Your Dotas and League and whatever else. But it really, it never really, it was those types of genres, and it was often games that were incredibly multiplayer focused, games like Fortnite and stuff where, it's like, okay, well, you have to be into some kind of competitive multiplayer here because all of these free-to-play games are, big, weird esports monsters, and that's just how it's going to be. Genshin Impact coming along and blowing up the way that it did, I think proves that there's something to be said for doing that on the single player side as well. I think you could also look, like if we look outside of the kind of mobile game influence and take things a little bit wider, a game that has been doing this for a very long time and carving its own path in a way that is very fascinating to watch, especially alongside everything that's been happening with, the Hoyoverse, like all of those games, is Warframe. and looking at Warframe over the past, it's like a decade now. Like, you know, hey, we've had 10 years of Destiny, but like we've had like, what is it? It is 10 or 11 years now of Warframe, and watching the ways in which Digital Extremes has like flipped that game on its head and tried to keep their existing player base on board by kind of creating like brand new games inside of their game, like, or, you know, maybe not 100% brand new, but, you know, hey, here's, you know, we've taken Warframe and we've taken it in this direction, and now you've got these open world encounters, and now you've got, you know, these motorcycle zones and whatever else, and, you know, it's like a lot of that stuff is aimed at, you know, the existing player base, but it does make for a flashy trailer and stuff. So I guess I have started playing Warframe again, and I think I understand it now, or I guess I would say I get it more than I did before. I feel like I have come to terms with some parts of what that game is and started to realize, like, okay, this is how you make progress in this game. Because that is a thing, that is the biggest problem with Warframe. We talked a lot about it last week. And approaching it with the idea of like, well, they just put out Warframe 1999 and I want to see the new thing. So let's re-download Warframe and take a look at it. And then you load it up and you read, they put up a web page that's like, here's what you're going to need to do to get ready for Warframe 1999. And I'm trying to compare where I'm at in the game with what they want you to have accomplished. And it's like, again, it's like this 7-arc story that when I look at it, I'm on like the second part of the second arc. And so there's so much between here and there. And that's not the only thing you need to do to access the content. That's the main thing. And some of the things you're doing in the context of working your way through that story are things that are going to take you dozens of hours to complete, in all likelihood. And so my first reaction was like, holy shit, why did they bother promoting Warframe 1999 on something like the Game Awards or some of the other things they've done with trailers to get people to watch that thing who might not already be playing Warframe? Because what they're doing is they're putting out a trailer for like end game content and being like, you should check this out. And you're like, word, I want to check this out. Oh, I super can't. Oh, okay. You want me to slog through all this other stuff that, you know, that I've been looking at off and on for the past decade. I need to do way more of that before I get to see anything. Anyway, I'm in a weird place with Warframe because I have put, according to the in-game timer, which seems wrong, but I'm just going to have to assume it's correct. I've played about 25 hours of Warframe. It seems like I've played way more than that over the last decade. But that is what the in-game timer says. It you know, maybe it's missing some early time, or I don't really know. And I've unlocked stuff in weird ways. Like, you know, someone who plays a lot of Warframe was watching. I ended up putting up a stream of it, and people were like, they were like, I don't understand how you have this item, but you haven't done these quests, and you haven't done, like, they've reconfigured the game in so many different ways over the years that, like, they've taken chunks of the game and said, oh, this thing that we added to the game, now it's a mainline quest. Like, there's a big part of the game that when it launched, it was kind of like here's our weird roguelite like thing. And now they've decided that is part of the main progression to unlock the next quest that you'll eventually need to play to get to the Warframe 1999 stuff. And so it's like they're reconfiguring large parts of the narrative on the fly. And that's really weird. You know, like Like you think of stories as these kind of like cohesive narrative. It's and Warframe is just kind of not that. Like I don't really know what the fuck is going on. I don't know who I am. You know, like I have an inkling of like, oh, there was this ancient conflict in the Orokin and the Tenno, you know, like whatever. Like you kind of piece together the broad strokes of the factions at play, I guess. And they've baked in big weird reveals over the years, you know, that are big spoilery things that I, you know, have mostly heard about. But like there's just large parts of that game where you're just running through corridors just cutting up fucking dudes, and there's like a few factions, and that part of it hasn't really changed. You know, it's still your ship flying to a thing, and then you see a grate fall on the ground, and your fucking weird pointy fucking ninja robot thing falls out of the grate, and then you run around and cut shit for like 8 minutes, and then leave. You know, and it is still extremely that game at its core, and it's very interesting to watch all of this stuff kind of like, you know, and to think of like where it is now. And so so they have reconstructed a lot of the maps and the things you use before you get into a mission. The like, hey, you're looking at a planet and there's all these dots strung together on the planet that all represent missions, and you don't know what you're really doing with any of that stuff. And there's a separate kind of quest marker, but like the quest objectives in my quest log are things on planets that I can't go to yet. And so I finally like settled down a couple of days ago with it and said, okay, I need to unlock these planets. Like there's a big part of this, and that's stuff that people would have done a lifetime ago, 10 years ago. If they had been playing the game, you know, faithfully, then they probably would have done all that. And you know, the process was totally different in a lot of ways then. So like, even if the missions were very similar and extremely samey to what they are now, the impact those missions have on your character and where you're going and what you're doing seems like it has changed in ways that feel like an improvement. Like I feel like I understand how to make progress in Warframe now. And that was the thing that was missing. It was just like, I don't know, man, I'm jumping around, and I don't know, I threw out a bunch of tornadoes and these guys got sucked into the tornado, and then I cut them all with my sword, and it was kind of rad. But then I did it 9 more times, and I'm like, okay, yeah. I at least have a basic, I think I do. I have a basic knowledge of like, okay, I need to go from Earth to Venus, but also I need to go to Mars. What I'm really trying to do is to get to this relay on this planet, because that's the thing that is going to trigger this other main story quest that you can look at in your quest log. And it says, it lists, like literally says prerequisites. You need to have done this, 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 and this. And they have all that in game. And so you can look at it and go, okay, I need to get to this planet and unlock this planet before I can do this big story quest. And the story quests, like I've done a few side quests and a couple of the kind of mainline quests. They're not bad. They're, again, like I think there's a lot of repetitive gameplay across a lot of Warframe. And so, you know, that kind of limits the amount of progress I'm willing to make in one night, because I eventually hit a wall with it where I'm like, yep, yeah, I've waited through this load time to walk out onto the surface of Venus like 6 times now, but I don't know, you gave me a fucking hoverboard and now I'm doing tricks and it's scoring me for the tricks I'm doing. So this is cool. This is all right. I'm still having a pretty good time. I feel like I'm unlocking weird new shit here and there. And it's kind of rad. But also, I have like 30 different characters, and you know, it's much like the First Descendant in a disgusting way. The best thing that the First Descendant has done they have created a game that like steals so many ideas from Warframe that when I went back into Warframe, I was like, oh, okay, I get it now. No, yeah, I understand. Okay. I know what I need to do. Yes, this all this all makes sense in a way that it didn't before. I got you. Okay. It's really crazy. It's a really crazy way to get into Warframe, I suppose, or get back into. I don't know. Maybe maybe I'm still not into Warframe. I don't know, but I'm playing it. I'm playing a little bit of it here and there, and I don't know. Like it's still just a bunch of mumbo jumbo. It's still just like, here's a bunch of nouns. Here's a bunch of nouns about an ancient conflict. And eventually we're gonna maybe explain. Like eventually we're gonna turn all that on its head, and you're gonna go, oh fuck. Wait a minute. I thought I was this, but I'm that. Warframe has done that. It sounds like 2 or 3 times now over the throughout that story. I don't know, man. It's still a cool game. It doesn't have a dog wearing a beret like the First Descendant does. And so, that's no good. But it does have a dog. It's got robot dogs even. You can build your own dog. Yeah, I don't know, man. I was on this planet walking around. There's a bunch of shops. And I walked up to a guy after I had done a bunch of quests out in the open world surrounding this zone. And this guy was just like, "Yeah, man, I'm doing pet stuff now. You want to build one?" And I didn't have any of the parts to do that. I don't know where you get any of the parts to do that. I don't know if I want to know where you go to get any of the pets to do that. I've got like cubes and fucking weird X's and shit that hover behind me and shoot lasers at enemies. I don't know that I need another robot dog right now. I've got a bunch of other weird shit that runs around after me and kills stuff, and that's been fine. Warframe's a mess. It's a weird messy game. I wonder what it would be like to start fresh on it now. Like if they have like configured the onboarding in a way that helps make all of this stuff make sense. Because that's kind of the other problem with it, as someone who, like, I looked at, there's a profile page that says like, hey, here's how much time you've played, and how many enemies you've killed, and all of this other stuff. And it was like, I had a badge on my profile that was like, you played in the closed beta. I'm like, yeah, I guess I did. I'm sure I did. I'm sure I did play Warframe at some point before it was properly out. And so as someone who went through some early part of the game from the beginning, anything they did to reconfigure it is kind of, lost on me because I'm already in the game, but I'm not in the game enough to know what the fuck is going on. And so, I don't know. That sounds like that's a common problem. It sounds like even people who are playing quite a lot of the game have no idea what the fuck is going on. And that the big reveals are kind of cool story moments, but ultimately they just kind of add more questions to it as opposed to actually making the rest of it make sense. And so I don't know. It's still cool that game has existed for as long as it has, and that they have made these little pockets of story. And the little pockets of story that I've seen, they're not great, but they're charming enough. There's a charm to that game because it feels like everything you see in it now that isn't just great falling to the ground, robot dropping down with sword, running forward and, murdering stuff. A lot of that stuff feels bolted on in ways that you see some rough edges around it, or you see the ambition meeting the limitations of the technology and the thing that they built. And so you see these sequences that, like, when you go from the kind of the peaceful area full of shops and walk out a door into what is an open world, which the game did not have until a few years ago. like an open zone that you're walking around, you're teleporting around, there's bounties out there. It's like shit you can do. It's a really long load time of you standing in a box basically while the frame rate stutters because it's loading up the big open world, and vice versa when you go from the open world and walk back into the building where all of the shops are. It's like you're in this airlock for a good long time and you see it stutter and chug and fucking, and you're like, man, you are unloading ancient technology and loading less ancient technology and vice versa to make this thing work still. And it's like fascinating that all of these different weird fucking pieces are part of a cohesive universe and part of a cohesive world and whatever else. Like it's really, they've really done some fucking crazy work over there. And it's funny because like the regular missions, like, hey man, this game was made a long time ago and I'm on a fucking pretty fast SSD with all this NVMe everything, and so like the regular missions just practically, I can't read the loading tips because it's just pop and and the grate's falling and you're running and killing. And so like that stuff is super fucking fast. And so like seeing this other stuff that's like, all right, this is going to take a long time because we're basically, it's like I wonder, it's almost like the Call of Duty thing where they're just like secretly loading a different executable in the background or something. However they did it, it's a really interesting fucking thing. And you see all of this stuff that, has been bolted onto it over the years and then smoothed over, and then some of the stuff that they bolted on, again, they've worked a lot of that into the main storyline quests and made it required content instead of just like, here's this year's add-on. It's like, nope, this is now the thing you need to do. If you haven't done this, you can't do the next stuff. And like watching all of that process, well, not watching it because it's not like I keep super close tabs on Warframe, but as someone who's come back to it time and time again over the years for little bits and pieces and just been like, yeah, man, I don't know. I'm still running forward and cutting these guys and like I'm still flipping out through the air and doing all this cool shit. And that's neat, but it's not enough. Like they've added a lot more to it to where now like it feels intriguing where I want to know what the fuck is it going to show me next? Because it's just such a weird thing and they have done so much of it. Like the one of the big things that people are talking about for Warframe 1999 that people really like apparently is a fucking dating sim. Like they've added a lot of weird stuff even to this latest thing. And so it's really fucking fascinating that they have done all of this stuff over the years, and have been able to do all of this stuff. Probably is it more intriguing than the First Descendant? Yeah, definitely. The First Descendant. There's no intrigue in the First Descendant. There is a game where they said, let's make an entire game out of Destiny patrol missions. Like the open world, you walk up to a thing and it's like, all right, now go kill these 12 guys or go do this or, or whatever. And it is even more about its nouns. It is even more about here's some nonsense about the arcade and we've got to get in here and like the story in the First Descendant is fucking terrible. It is terribly told. Like the actual particulars of it are fine. You're like, oh, I don't know, we got these powers and there's sci-fi stuff and oh, you're not gonna be able to handle the extreme power of this artifact and oh, you somehow handled it. You must be special and blah blah. Whatever. That type of shit. Maybe they will get there with it because, obviously Warframe has had a decade to fucking reconfigure itself in a dozen different ways. The thing with the First Descendant is now they're in what they're calling season 2, which is, it's a fresh battle pass. It's whatever else, you know, that comes with that. And so they've really had two kind of main content additions since the game has shipped. And the first of those is like, okay, so there's missions in the game that are larger and they're instanced off from the open world. And these are kind of like the end, like when you get to the end of a zone, there's going to be, or you get to the midpoint of a zone, there's going to be one of those. You get to the end of the zone, there's going to be another one. And so you have like, let's call it 12, 16 of those missions are in the game. The first thing they added was a remix of those missions where they made them a little bit harder and added like a couple of different gameplay things to them that almost like all of them involved you standing on pads. Like you need to stand on this icon to open this door. And if you stand on the wrong icon, it's not going to open the door. And they had to change it for colorblind reasons almost immediately after they shipped it. Like they shipped it and people were like, this is fucking garbage. And it is. It's fucking garbage. And so those are now invasion missions, and those work on a timer. And so like 3 of those larger missions at any given time are denoted as invasions, and you can go do them and get like different rewards. But it's basically the same mission with like a remixed final confrontation. Like they made it so there are pads you have to stand on so you can damage the final boss. And so it creates this big weird DPS check at the end of these missions that like I a couple times I've run them. I have been with like teams of players and we have not been able to beat the boss, not because it's too difficult, but because it like frenzies and kills everybody on a timer. And so if you don't kill it by the end of this timer, then you lose automatically. And you're like, well, this sucks. This is fucking terrible. And so, you know, that's like, that was their big first like gameplay addition was like, and I don't think it was met particularly positively. The second thing that they added more recently that was part of their second season is actually way more like Warframe. They added a mysterious ship or series of ships that are strung together, a mysterious new area. But it's really just a mission, and it is a mission that slightly reconfigures itself every time you run it, meaning sometimes when you run into this room and kill everybody in it, sometimes the door on the left opens and you go that way. Sometimes the door on the right opens and you go that way, but it all leads to the same exact boss fight over and over again. It's just like, oh, it's like, you know, it's this corridor is different than this corridor, I guess. But like all of the fights are the same. And so it's completely meaningless that it has this slightly different configuration because it doesn't really bring you anywhere cool. There are chests that you can open along the way. And those chests get you items that you can use to construct the new things they added for season 2. So it's like a thing you're meant to run over and over again so that you can level up your dog. Or there's a new guy they made and you can find the parts to construct the guy in some of these chests as well. And that's it. That's the other thing they've added. And it's the same boss fight every time. You can run it on normal. You can run it on hard. It's meant for you to run over and over again because you are meant to be farming these materials out of these chests so that you can level up your dog. And leveling up your dog just makes it better. Like the dog picks up items for you. They added the dog. The dog is new. And the dog will pick up items for you and it will sell your junk according to how you set your junk filters. And so when you level up your dog, the radius that the dog will pick up items is increased. That's it. The dog doesn't fight. You do not pet the dog. Maybe there's an emote in there that you can pet the dog, but I have not seen any dog petting happening. And so like it really, I think my problem with the First Descendant, because it is a game that like, again, I think the shooting and just the overall kind of gameplay stuff is fine. Like the characters play dramatically differently in some cases. where, you know, every character has 4 abilities, but, you know, sometimes those abilities are just like very direct and easy to understand. Like, yo, man, you're shooting ice. And you can shoot ice 3 different ways, or you can run on ice to run faster. And then you've got stuff like, oh, the water lady splashes down big puddles, and the puddles of water will slow enemies down. But you can also set it up so that you do more damage when you're standing on water. And there's another lady that you kind of trigger, you toggle one of her abilities, and when you toggle it on during combat, you eventually, if you're configured properly, you practically have infinite ammo. And so it's really her abilities are being used to make guns more effective as opposed to dealing elemental damage. And so they've done a decent job of like making the characters feel different from one another. One is like a rhythm game thing, where when you pop her abilities, a little DDR style thing appears on screen and you kind of shoot in time to that. And so they've done some interesting stuff with that. But like also, it really just feels like the community of people that want that game just want more ass. And all of the discussion around this game is around like, what? Okay, so I can paint these outfits, right? How do I get the flesh colored paint so I can make the ladies look more naked? And it feels like that all of the conversation around that game from the people playing it is around that, where it's just like, okay, they're going to put in more hot skins, and look at this nun outfit. And, you know, they launched with fucking schoolgirl outfits and bikinis and stuff. Like it's that DOA style stuff. And this is a game again, you know, like they've rendered like visible labia under the bikinis and stuff like that. That's the game they're making. Right. And so, one of the things that they're talking about here is like, you know, well, we're investigating the jiggle physics that players have been asking for. We're looking into adding that to the game. And you're like, all right. And so like that is that game. And that is how they think they're going to make their money, is by selling, you know, I don't know, bigger asses to people or whatever. And like, whatever, fine. I'm not like prudish about it. It's like, oh, sure, dude, whatever. Like, yeah, make your big, weird, pretty lady game and sell pretty outfits for the pretty ladies. It's whatever. I think it's just that like they launched with like, there's some promise to the game that they made, but everything they've added since then has been subpar from like a pure gameplay perspective. As someone who likes a small handful of characters and isn't necessarily chasing after all of the roster or whatever, like when they add new characters to the game, that's not an immediate new draw for me, especially when one of them, they're like, we added this cool sniper. And I'm like, cool, man. This game has no encounters in it that require any kind of fucking sniping whatsoever. So cool. Like these targets are not hard to hit, and they're not far enough away that you need a long distance rifle to hit them. So sure. I mean, you know, they're making, what they're really making is they're making weapons with low rates of fire that do a lot of damage. That's ultimately their interpretation of the sniper rifle. They're certainly not the only game to do that. And when you get into the big weird boss fights, the kind of railgun like nature of that rifle, I'm sure, can fuck shit up. But like there's, you know, it just, there are a billion different ways to win those fights, and so you don't necessarily need that shit. But yeah, I don't know. It's like, I guess like I'm coming at it from the wrong angle, because I'm coming at it going like, man, if you guys just added more content, more things to do, more enemy types, like what, you know, whatever, and maybe a new gun here and there, which they've sort of done, that would be cool. I would probably keep playing this game on a more regular basis. But instead, the gameplay additions have been really rough, and, you know, instead it's like again, all of the conversations that you see around this game online are from people talking about skins and the fashion aspect of the game, which is not that interesting to me. So yeah, I don't know. Interesting, like, compare and contrast between the First Descendant and Warframe, because again, the First Descendant is definitely a game, like, you look at all the way that they built their the way that you modify and level up guns and all of that, like, you and characters and everything, you look at it and just go like, okay, yeah, you lifted all of this directly from Warframe. Like, yes, okay, a mastery rank based on how many different characters you've leveled up. Like, yes, of course, I get it. Like, yes, you did the thing. You made Warframe, but with pretty lady anime whatever in it. And I'm sure that there's an audience for that, but yeah, I don't know. They seem very attentive of their community, but their community seem like a bunch of fucking sickos. Which I applaud. But also, Alphonse's Best says, and now Warframe has pretty ladies in it. I'll tell you, I don't find anything that looks remotely human in Warframe to be good looking in the least. I think that there's an art problem in Warframe where anytime they try to render a face or a head on a body, it is always these creepy looking mutated things that I don't think look especially good. I think that, yeah, anytime they try to render any kind of facial anything or a real looking head on a body or whatever else, I think that Warframe doesn't look good. But that's mostly just like, I don't really like their art style in Warframe very much for anything. Even just the kind of, like, overly jagged edge, overly pointy, like, player suits, the frames themselves. I don't know that I think that any of the Warframes themselves actually look good. I mean, if we're really talking about it, I think that that's probably the part of the game I like the least. When it's just like, here's a bunch of weird blindfolded people and they're all fucking, there's a tube coming out of here and there's this and that, and now this is a weird pointy fucking robot with a sword, and you're like, all right. That stuff doesn't really do anything for me either. Like, just as an overall art style, it doesn't do anything for me. And so, yeah, I don't know. I guess I'm gonna keep. I guess I'm gonna keep playing Warframe. Like, that's the upshot of all of this, is that there's, like, stuff in Warframe that I want to accomplish, and very little of it is attached to the big crazy story quest reveals, because I know that those are a billion years away from where I'm at right now. And but at the same time, there's stuff I want to do in that game. There's stuff in Warframe that I'm like, yeah, huh. I guess I do want to unlock these fucking relays and go to these different planets, and I don't know, I'm mastery rank 7 and I've got all these fucking robot suits I've never used and guns that I've never equipped. I guess I might as well start equipping them and leveling all of this shit up, huh? But I'm not prestiging anything and leveling up it again. I'm not polarizing slots or anything. I'm not attached to any of the characters or Warframes or anything that I have. So I'm just like, and you get stuff to level 30 so fucking fast. Like, getting to max level in one of those frames, it happens so fucking fast. So, you don't have to play that much to get there with that stuff. But yeah, I don't know. It's a cool game. And so, I guess to kind of reflect on what we were talking about, I think Warframe is a good example of, like, you can do a free-to-play game and still not seem like scumbags. And I'm sure that there have been times over the years that people have been frustrated or outright angry at the way that they have monetized that game. I'm sure there's been missteps over the years, right? I mean, they wouldn't they're only human. They're gonna probably make mistakes on that front. I'm sure that there were times over the years that people were like, "This game is fucking cooked. Fuck these guys." Yeah. But yeah, I look at it and go like, hey, it seems like, and it's something that I kind of see reflected in the tone of some of the little story stuff, the little pockets of these little side quests and these little, ambitious little moments of dialogue and stuff in a game that didn't need face-to-face dialogue, or didn't have a lot of face-to-face dialogue at all for a long time. Like, you look at it and go like, this thing feels like it's got moxie, baby. It's got there's something charming about it in a weird way. Yeah, I don't know. I like the overall vibe of it. Like, it's not perfect. Again, I don't really like the art style. There's stuff about Warframe that is very clunky and still very weird, but it all feels like it's coming from the right place, if that makes any sense. And I like that about it. It feels like a game made by people, and that's not something like, especially when we get into free to play and you look at the way that some of those packages are offered and the way some stuff gets sold. It doesn't feel like humans came up with that. It feels like an algorithm came up with like, oh, well, here's how much we think we can charge for this, and here's how much we think we can get away with, but like that game feels like it's made by people, and it feels like it's got soul to it that the First Descendant does not have, and a lot of other games do not have. And so I don't know. I like that about it too. Yeah, man, Warframe. Fucking Warframe. Not a lot of news. Obviously, this is a pretty much an off week for a lot of people in the video game business. A lot of places they're not going to go back to work until probably the 6th in a lot of cases. And so, it's been a slow couple of weeks here on the news front. There was this Video Games Chronicle picked up on a Famitsu interview with Herman Holst, who, if you remember, is the software side CEO of PlayStation. And basically, whether this is lip service or not remains to be seen. But, he is kind of saying that they are open to looking at some of their back catalog and looking at some of the IPs that they own, that none of that stuff is necessarily off limits. Which in a lot of ways is, of course, that's the answer you would give, no matter what the situation was or what hill must be climbed before that IP is unlocked or whatever. But anyway, so VGC has translated this. Obviously, Famitsu is a Japanese publication. He says the various IPs that we own are an important asset to PlayStation, and as part of our efforts to strengthen our portfolio, we are continually looking at opportunities to leverage past IP as well as develop new franchises. Our goal is to publish games by the world's best creators, both inside and outside of PlayStation. And we have achieved many successes so far by working closely with external development studios. And then the rest of it is him saying that he is stoked about the reception to Astro Bot and that it won Game of the Year and all of that sort of stuff. Yeah, external development studios. I mean, so that's, in a situation where in a situation where Sony's own internal studios are maybe not there the way they used to be, or rather, I mean, they've been reconfigured. It's not that they don't have anyone developing video games at PlayStation, but like the Japan studio and Liverpool and some of the other stuff over the years that you would associate with particular franchises and particular types and styles of games, a lot of that stuff is gone. But what this is saying is like, hey, if the right pitch comes along and, and someone comes along and says, hey, we've got a really strong idea for making an Ape Escape game, that Sony's not going to laugh them off the phone, which is good. There are other publishers out there that are not taking those calls, that are like, okay, like, because a smaller studio is going to come in and they're going to pitch an average sized game and they're going to have a scope that, like they're maybe not going to come in and pitch the biggest game. And you'll have some publishers that are still only on the hunt for massive games. There was the story going around that Glenn Schofield and some of the other creators of Dead Space took a meeting with EA and sat down with EA and pitched them on doing Dead Space 4, or doing a new Dead Space game, and that EA was not interested. And I look at that and go, well, yeah, EA's a company that they've got their big franchise hits. They're the company that said we've got to get out of Star Wars. It's costing us too much money, and so the idea of a game the size of Dead Space, a single player adventure and everything else, over the, all of that, that is just not something that they're going to bite on right now. And so, I think that at least, even if this answer is lip service, even if this answer is the typical answer that that you're going to give, I mean, it at least is sending the message about like, hey, yes, we've done well working with external studios. We make our own games. We've done this. Like, the thing here is, if you're a studio that can make the next great Wipeout game, you should talk to them about it, and they at least seem like that they are open for business when it comes to those sorts of discussions. If you come in with some tiny pitch and you're like, we want to revive Jumping Flash and we think it would be cool to do a new Jet Moto, and it's like, we're going to have like 6 tracks, there's some stuff that, yeah, they're not going to be interested in things that are super small, is my guess. But also, I think, that would be something that would be really cool for like kind of their indie directives, or, the people that are kind of running the indie arm of PlayStation, like that type of developer relations and whatever else. Like, I think that would be kind of awesome, because there are some of these franchises that literally, like, you're never going to do anything with Jumping Flash. Like, Sony's never going to say, like, we've cracked that nut and we've got this big $150 million fucking Jumping Flash game we really think's going to be a system seller, whatever, right? It's not going to happen. But you still own this thing, and, there's probably some indie developer out there that would make a fucking cool game that you could call Jumping Flash, and, that would be like a neat homage to those games or whatever, but it would be small, right? And so I always liked that idea. Like, Nintendo did the was it the Crypt of the Necro Dancer thing, and there's been cases of Nintendo working with obviously external developers over the years and whatever, but like, the idea of, hey, we're gonna partner with this smaller indie studio to make this thing that otherwise would have no business being, like, we would never approve this otherwise, but we think this will be like a small, smaller project and whatever. Yeah, like, Ubisoft did it internally with or I guess that's not an internal project, but the roguelike Prince of Persia thing is an example of them kind of dipping their toes into that as well. And I think that's really great. I wish that, we would see more stuff like that. That would be something that, it'd be great to see EA doing something along those lines with a lot of the things that they own. That would be great to see some of those things come back. Of course, like, if you're the small developer, like, what's in it for you? You have to weigh it out. Like, okay, I could just make a spiritual successor to Syndicate. I don't need to make a game and call it Syndicate. I don't need to go get like the fucking Bullfrog assets and all of this stuff. I could, and that's been done. What was the game? Was it what was the name of that game? Was it Satellite Rain? Yeah. That was 9 years ago. But like the thing you have to weigh out at if you are the small developer that might pitch this sort of thing is like, well, like, do I make more money making this on my own? How much do I benefit from the PR push and the association with this classic IP versus how much money do I have to give up to EA to use, for the rights to use the name Syndicate? And I think that's something that probably, a lot of EA IPs specifically run into more than some of this other stuff. Because a lot of this other stuff we're talking about is like, you couldn't, like, could you make another game that is like Ape Escape inspired? Sure. Yeah, I guess you could have a guy with a net and he's catching anthropomorphic alligators. I don't know, man. Hedgehogs. He's catching a wide variety of platform mascot-esque characters or something, whatever you end up doing. Like there would be a way to do that, but Ape Escape has such a specific aesthetic along with that gameplay and everything that I think that once you lose that, you're maybe a little too far removed. But it probably depends on the pitch. I don't know. That's kind of the only thing happening in news. I've been thinking, so, I don't know that I'm going to put together a traditional top 10 list. I've been writing, and this stuff will start going up on the Patreon here as soon as I have a few more of them done. I built a list of, let's see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 15 games. Let's call it 18 games because there's 3 that didn't come out this year. Or somewhere in that neighborhood because I may cut 1 or 2. But I started writing about like, hey, here's and they're not the best games of the year. They're the games that I felt like summed up my year in gaming in some cases, and games that I felt that I wanted to talk about. And so I've been writing that out. But I don't know, like honestly, like I'm still, when I think about what is the best game that I played this year, what is the game of the year this year? I'm having trouble. Like I've got it down to basically, let's call it 2 games. And yeah, I'm not sure which way that's gonna go just yet. It's been fascinating to see some of the other kind of game of the year awards and stuff that have gone on, and we ended up getting a question about it in the email about role-playing games and the kind of reascendance of those role-playing games in like an awards capacity. I mean, obviously you have Baldur's Gate, being a very big deal there, but then you see stuff now like Metaphor and the Final Fantasy remake stuff has been very well received, and seeing those sorts of games, like getting into those discussions, because classically, and by classically I really do mean 20 years ago, there was a window kind of post Final Fantasy VII, where it was just very hard, like that style, especially the console style of role-playing game, was really not being taken at that level of seriousness. Like those were genre games for genre nerds. The people that liked that genre played those games, and everyone else stayed the fuck away. Because there were so many of them. I mean, the big ones, obviously Final Fantasy would sell better than, I don't know, what, Kadelka. I don't know, whatever. but there were just, in the wake of a game like Final Fantasy VII and as the popularity of that franchise and a couple of others, and when we think worldwide, I think you factor Dragon Quest into that in a big way back then, but Dragon Quest was not a big deal here in the States at that point. A lot of those games got brought west. A lot of those games got localized and brought over here, and they were only for the sickos, man. And that's cool. But now like that stuff is super, I guess, super mainstream. And so we're seeing, a game like Metaphor win Game of the Year awards at some locations and in some of the remaining outlets, the very few that still fucking exist. But it was a contender at the Game Awards too, on top of that. So, it's been really interesting seeing that genre kind of come back in this big way and have this sort of, these more kind of mainstream moments. I think it just goes to show, again, we've talked about it before, but like, the audience's increased willingness to meet a lot of these games halfway. That 20 years ago, PlayStation 2 times, PlayStation 3 times, the audience was just not there for that stuff. And yeah, I don't know, that's a really interesting. Yes, yeah, X-Sisters is right. Yes, as soon as anime became a thing for normies, sure, I guess. But yes, the increased popularity of anime has absolutely contributed to this environment where these sorts of things are getting taken more seriously and are doing better commercially, and those games are finding success in a way that they didn't before. We talk about Yakuza all the time. I won't go into it all over again, but the very idea that, like, when you think about what those Yakuza games were when Sega was bringing them out on the fucking PlayStation 2, and how straight up butt those games were, just full on ass, just like, what the fuck is this fucked up thing? Man, fucking Michael Madsen, did he want to be here for this? It sure doesn't seem like he did. Like, those days, when you think about those days for that franchise and look at how central the Like a Dragon franchise is these days, how core it is for a lot of people, it's fucking crazy. Like, it's crazy. Looks like the winners of the Steam Awards have been announced. They were taking votes in, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 11 different categories. These were weird. This was like purely user voted, and I feel like a lot of these choices are like feel weird, not necessarily just because they're like, oh, it's different because the people voted them, but it's more like were there weird campaigns around some of these games to, like this, some of it just feels wrong. Anyway, Black Myth Wukong is their game of the year. It was nominated, like, this whole list feels weird to me. Well, not the whole list. A lot of this list feels weird to me. The finalists for game of the year on Steam are Stalker 2, Black Myth Wukong, Space Marine 2, Helldivers 2, and Balatro. Look, man, Space Marine was okay. I think that's the nicest thing. Like, it looked nice, it played fine, but like, the idea of Space Marine as like a game of the year contender, I just like, no, that's not even, no way. Like, that's a cool game. Don't get me wrong. Is it one of the 5 best games of the year? Absolutely fucking not. VR game of the year went to Metro Awakening VR. which was I'm gonna guess that is the one franchise that anyone voting had heard of that was not Five Nights at Freddy's, because the other it was like, did you want to vote for Metro Awakening VR or Davigo or Maestro or Five Nights at Freddy's Help Wanted 2 or Blade and Sorcery? I don't think you needed to own maybe they had a limitation in there, but like I don't know that you necessarily needed to own a VR headset to vote in that category. And so I wonder, I'm speculating, obviously, but I look at it and just go like, did people just pick the thing that they knew? They just look at it and go like, yeah, man, Metro. I guess, I don't know. I just want to get the sticker that you get for voting for these. I just want to vote for all these categories so I can get a Steam sticker. The Labor of Love Award, which is meant to go to a game that, you know, it's kind of a best ongoing game equivalent. Their description: this game has been out for a while. The team is well past the debut of their creative baby, but being the good parents they are, the devs continue to nurture and support their creation. This game, to this day, is still getting new content after all these years. Your winner, Elden Ring. What? I don't think shipping a DLC is something that, like, they sold it. That's not a labor of love. That's a labor of they sold it for money and dollars. That is like that is the exact opposite of the spirit of this category. Obviously the game did get some patches, but the other games in this category make a lot more sense too. It's Dota 2, No Man's Sky, Baldur's Gate, and Stardew Valley. And you look at those and go like, yeah, that fits the description of this labor of love category. Elden Ring does not. I wish, you know, obviously they're just going to do fan voting and be done with it, because why, you know, at the end of the day, Valve is only going to care so much about this stuff. But I wish Valve would put a fucking thumb on these scales a little bit, just to be like, that is not this, like, no. Like, I'm sorry, Elden Ring is completely inappropriate for this category. You made a mistake if you voted for that. And yeah, where's is it? I keep calling it Caves of Cud. Is it Quid? I keep calling it Caves of Cud. I installed that. I apparently played that a very long time ago, for all of 9 minutes. But I reinstalled Caves of Cud, and I've been afraid to start it. I've been afraid to start that game because it seems real good and also real fucking crazy. Best game on Steam Deck goes to God of War Ragnarok. Which that's, you know, I don't know, like, God, that's it's impressive that game runs as well as it does on a Steam Deck. So I see why that game would take the voting here. Deep Rock Galactic Survivors on here, which that's a great game to play portably. Warhammer 40K Rogue Trader, which was a 2023 game according to their Steam page. Balatro and Hades 2, which is still in early access, but hey. So yeah, I see why God of War would win that. Like, there was a lot of hubbub around that game when it launched on PC, because they were like, hey, we're Steam Deck verified, and we spent time making sure that it ran well there, and it's cool that they did that, and so they were rewarded as such. The Better with Friends award goes to Helldivers 2. Pretty obvious. That's the right answer for this. Other games in that category were Satisfactory, Space Marine 2, Pal World, and Sons of the Forest. Outstanding Visual Style award. Their note here: visual style doesn't aspire to real-world graphical fidelity, though a noble goal in itself. It describes a distinctive look and feel that suffuses an entire game. Yeah. Silent Hill 2 is the winner. That seems like a weird. I don't. It's a weird choice. In a year where metaphor exists, I think that giving that award to Silent Hill 2 is bananas. Straight up. The other nominees in that category: Nine Souls, Hades 2, and Never. Most innovative gameplay award goes to Liar's Bar, which I don't think I had heard of until these awards started surfacing. It looks like a Liar's Dice game, but is it also doing the like shoot a guy thing like that other like that game with the shotgun? Yeah, but it looks like you play Liar's Dice against humans in that game. Matchmaking is now available, they say. The other nominees there for innovative gameplay: Satisfactory, which I guess Satisfactory has a September 2024 date on it. But man, how long has Satisfactory been around, really? Right? I mean, is that game like 10? No, not 10 years old, but like at least like 5, right? Like 7? Yeah. That's Satisfactory's been around forever. But hey, I now that they're 1.0, maybe I'll check it out. I don't know. Like that, every time I've looked at Satisfactory, I've been like, yeah, I don't know, this game's for somebody, but it's not for me. 2019 was when it was early access. I guess that's not that long ago. I guess that is that long ago. 2019 doesn't seem like it is, but boy. Other games in innovative gameplay. So Liar's Bar wins. The other nominees were Satisfactory, Stalker 2, Helldivers 2, and Balatro. I would not call the gameplay in Helldivers 2 innovative. That's a weird, like that's a weird label to put on that game. Like Helldivers 2 is a lot of things. I guess the way that they build their kind of like cross-world conflict stuff was innovative. Other games have done that sort of stuff too, I guess. But like Stalker 2, innovative gameplay. I mean, especially like what is the innovative bit of that? I guess would be my criticism of that nomination. You could argue that maybe that A-Life system was supposed to be more innovative, but that was a massive bug. That is still not in the game in the way that they intended it to be. Like they started patching that stuff in. Hey, they fixed it. They made Stalker 2 work with a DualSense Edge. One of the patches that they've done is has added that to the game, so that's nice. For me, a DualSense Edge user. Disco Spawn in the Discord says, reminder that Starfield won that category last year. Yeah, it's you know, I don't mean this in a snobbish and dickish sort of way, but this is why you can't trust user voted stuff. You know, people are like, oh, it should all be user voted and we want the people to do it. Like, yeah, man, but like you need to have there needs to be some fucking editorial process on this. Like, even if it's just like curating the list of games up front or something, so that you're kind of like, again, having credible contenders in these categories. Because when you're saying Stalker 2 is the most innovative gameplay, well, you know, hey, whatever. I don't know. Maybe a lot of the people on Steam are like 12. And this is the first time they've played a game like that, and they're like, "This is blowing me away." I don't know, but it's like it's why it's nice to have, like, whether it's voted by peers in the industry like the DICE Awards or the press, the way the Game Awards are done, or, you know, whatever, you know, the way that the BAFTAs are done as well. Like, it's nice to have something that has like some kind of sense about it, like that they try to put a head on it. It isn't always perfect, but like when you get to these like People's Choice Awards or whatever, like it's just like everyone just put their favorite game in every hole, and that was that. The Best Game You Suck At award went to Black Myth Wukong. Okay. The other nominees here were Dragon Ball Sparking 0, Tekken 8, Ghost of Tsushima, and The Finals. Ghost of Tsushima is not a hard game. Like, if you suck at that game, well, look. Finals, I could see that being on that list, like that type of multiplayer game where you might just be getting smoked over and over again. Like, I could see a Counter-Strike 2 being on this list or something, right? Best soundtrack went to everyone's favorite 2024 game, Red Dead Redemption. Which is an October 2024 release on PC. The other nominees were Silent Hill 2, Frostpunk 2, Horizon Forbidden West, and Fate Stay Night Remastered. Which, okay. Outstanding Story-Rich Game Award went to Black Myth Wukong. This is just a fucking crazy list. Black Myth Wukong wins. The other nominees were Stalker 2, Mouthwashing, which, okay. Final Fantasy 16. And sorry, I had to, and Ghost of Tsushima. Mouthwashing probably should have won that one, but like, I don't, Stalker 2, well, whatever. I don't think Stalker 2 is outstanding in any way. So to say Outstanding Story-Rich Game Award, Outstanding Story-Rich Game Award isn't that you're saying that the story is outstanding. It's that it is a story-rich game that is outstanding. So, which they should probably rename the category. Because their little descriptive thing here is really more about the story than about anything else. I think Ghost of Tsushima, of the games on this list, I think Ghost of Tsushima and Mouthwashing are probably the two games that would make sense here. I don't know. And the last one is the Sit Back and Relax Award. Farming Simulator 25 wins that one. This category at least seems to make sense. Like, the nominees in this category are like, yes, that's, yeah. House Flipper 2, Tiny Glade, which is, Tiny Glade is a cool trailer. TCG Card Shop Simulator, Farming Simulator 25, and Web Fishing, which I think Web Fishing should have won that one. Yeah, Power Wash Simulator was robbed, but that's not a 2024 game, right? Anyway, congratulations to everyone who voted and got stickers. You've got cool chat stickers for all the chatting you're doing on Steam. Do you chat on Steam? I don't. I don't like it. I know they've added all these stickers and stuff. Like, I'm looking at, yeah, it's a lot of people saying no, never. You've accidentally chatted on Steam. You chat with one specific person. Yeah, I've had moments there where like I've chatted with someone on Steam for a little bit there who, you know, like I don't talk to any other way or whatever, and they've contacted me and I've been like, oh, I guess okay, hi, okay, but yeah, I don't really use the Steam chat stuff. But you know, if you voted, you got more stickers to use in chat. Like they should have chat. I'm not saying, you know, that all they should, you know, but like there's just there's large parts of Steam that I don't really fuck with very often. Like I keep my friends lists tight on Steam to the people that I actually know. Because I've had bad experiences with that where, you know, like I've accepted too many friend requests and then you get like a bunch of weird chat messages from people like wanting you to type out their own personal podcast for them or something. And they're like, how's the game? You're like, oh, I see you're playing this. How is it? And you're like, dude, I don't, like, what? Who? I'm sorry, no. Yeah, I don't, you know, I think the way to make an ultimate, I don't know, man. How do you make a good awards show? How do you make good user vote? Making good user voting is a hard problem on the internet, right? I think especially they did put some minor restrictions, I think, on the Steam. No, I don't think they did put any restrictions on it. I was thinking about the Steam Deck purchasing where they're like, you must have purchased a game or your account must have been made before this time or whatever. But I don't think they put any real restrictions on who could vote for the Steam Awards. And so in a scenario where anyone can go make 1 billion accounts on Steam for free, you know, like it becomes very quickly just kind of becomes a suspect list just on that basis. And so I think Steam's in a position where they could really, yeah, any non-limited Steam account can vote. That is so anyone that hasn't been VAC banned, I guess, can vote in the Steam Awards. And so there's nothing stopping you from making a bunch of accounts and saying, well, I didn't get to give my acceptance speech at the Game Awards, but God damn it, we're gonna and yeah. There are already a lot of like bot accounts and things on Steam. I get the impression of, you know, it's like stuff like I don't have my inventory public because when I did, I got a lot more login attempts on my account and a lot more bullshit chat messages and stuff from people going like, trade me your fucking Luger morph or whatever, you know, like all of the weird TF2 items that I have that are apparently still worth some amount of money. I don't know. I think the value on a lot of that stuff has dropped, but yeah, I had to lock all that stuff down because I was just, yeah, like that was the number one thing I was getting spam for. And a lot of that stuff seemed like it was, you know, like as time went on, that stuff seemed more like bots. And so I wonder how many people are just like running weird bot accounts on Steam to facilitate trades and whatever weird shit that people are doing. Whatever weird shit people are doing with Counter-Strike skins these days. None of it's good. We know that much. There's nothing good happening there, but yeah, I don't know. That's that. So, you know, there's things you could do, right? You could put different limitations because it's Steam. They could say, hey, we're only going to let you vote in the Steam Deck category if we see that you bought a Steam Deck or we see your account is logged in on a Steam Deck, which is something that they would theoretically know. We're only going to let you vote in the VR category if you've downloaded Steam VR at some point in the last 12 months and launched it or, you know, whatever. Like there's stuff they could do to make this better. All of that requires work, though. And so I guess in the grand scheme of things, when I look at Steam and probably the relatively small number of people who are working on new features for Steam at Valve compared to, working on games that they'll never ship or whatever it is, I can't sit here and go like they should go a lot harder on developing better awards features or whatever else. Like they should, but also I think there's a lot of other stuff that they should do instead of that when it comes to just renovating Steam and keeping Steam up to date and all of that. I think Steam is in a mostly good place these days, better than it was for a lot of years. But there's still, like I saw a developer mentioning this, that they had just shipped a game and they were like, oh, I forgot, or I didn't realize that there was this gigantic wave of like Steam curator scammers that anytime a game ships, they find out how to contact the developers and try to pretend to be this big deal curator, or they pretend to be other people and try to scam a bunch of keys for the game out of the developer so that they can turn around and sell them. And that there are people running those types of scams all the time on new releases. And so like the Steam curator system in particular is a system that like I think they went into it with the best of intentions, and I think there are aspects of the Steam curation stuff that is actually really cool, but it got bogged down by a bunch of weird shit. And like a lot of other stuff and systems on Steam, like people were using it for harassment and just like using the curator system for a bunch of weird bullshit that that it was never intended for, that they didn't then go in and clean up. I think that's ultimately the thing that Valve doesn't do is moderate their stuff. They don't moderate these awards in a way that makes them like feel a little bit more credible or honest or accurate, I suppose. They just go like, well, it's the will of the people. Here you go. And if it sucks, well, it's the fucking people's fault. Like, yeah, I guess you could guide them in ways that would, work to everyone's benefit, without, compromising the integrity of the thing you're trying to do with awards. But sure. Yeah, it's like, okay, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, the curator thing. Like, people are just going to use it for what they use it for. And like, okay. And I always wonder, like, if that's because that they have, like, if that is just some big, dumb, like, the free market is spoken, will of the people, libertarian, dumb shit kind of thing at the center of Valve, or if it is really just like they develop features and then they don't have time they're on to the next thing. They're like, okay, cool. We shipped that thing. I'm wheeling my desk over here and we're working on Deadlock now. Okay, I'm working over here. Okay, we're going over here. We're going to finish this TF2 comic. We're going to go do this. And so there's a lot of the stuff at Valve doesn't necessarily feel malicious. It just feels like a lot of it is very fire and forget. And honestly, moderation is a fucking pain in the ass. To actually do it well, to actually do it right, it's expensive. It's a fucking massive pain. Like, I get why they wouldn't necessarily put the level of resource on that stuff that it probably needs. They could double that company size overnight in moderation alone, And so, I get on some level why they don't really they don't really spend enough time on that sort of stuff. But I still really like Steam. I don't know, like I think that the platform that they've made still has a ton of potential, and I think they've done a really good job of like realizing a lot of that stuff. But I think there's still more to do. Still more to do. And they occasionally just pull out some weird shit and just like Like the Steam Points store stuff I thought was actually kind of cool, where they're like, hey, we're gonna do weird backgrounds and some of it is game themed and whatever else. I think that was kind of like an interesting addition. And yeah, I don't know. It's Steam. Steam ain't bad. The Steam thing, have you heard of it? Not bad. Why don't we get into some emails here? Let's see. All right. James from Southfield, Michigan? Is MI Michigan, or is that MS is Mississippi? MI is Michigan, right? Anyway, big fan of the show. Curious to hear your personal preferences for Transformers and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle characters, as I have become a fan of both brands over the last few years. My personal favorites are Wheeljack, Soundwave, and Raphael. Man, I don't know. So as far as the turtles, I think Donatello is the choice because his bow has the longest range. It's a slow attack, but in most games he outranges everybody else. If you want someone who is going to kind of split the difference on speed and power, then you go with Leonardo, because the swords usually have a good long range in a lot of these games. And they are usually faster than Donatello's bow. I don't really care about the turtles as characters. Like, it's not, I think the canonical answer was always Michelangelo, because he's the cool one, right? He loves pizza. My daughter saw the intro to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I think it was one of the games. What the fuck was I showing her? I was showing her the game, but then I think we ended up watching a video of the intro to the cartoon. And she was, and Michelangelo is shown holding pizza while riding a skateboard. It might have just been the animated intro for Shredder's Revenge. That's what it might have been. Because I told her you could play as a girl in that. I told her you could play as April O'Neil, and she really wanted to see that. But she was so stoked at the idea of this dude fucking just hanging out holding pizza. Like, he's got pizza? Why does this guy have pizza? That's so cool. He's got pizza. I'm like, yeah, pizza is cool. You're right. You're right. Pizza is cool. But I feel like, yeah, back in the, when that cartoon was first on, like, Michelangelo was the answer because nunchucks are awesome if you're 12. Nunchucks are awesome, period. You don't need to put an age on that. And Michelangelo was the lighthearted, fun guy. So, like, he just seems like he was always the fucking guy. So, yeah, I don't know. As far as Transformers, my favorite Transformers these days, it's always Soundwave. I think a cool looking Soundwave art is about as cool as it gets. Except for Shockwave with his fucking big glowing eye and his pointed ears and his gun arm and stuff. Like, a really good piece of Shockwave art is real fucking good. The actual toy, the actual original Shockwave toy, does not look nearly as cool as he has been rendered on some comic book covers and stuff over the years. But I think Shockwave is pretty fucking dope. I just bought so I was ordering a bunch of stuff. I was ordering a bunch of stuff off AliExpress, like you do. And I was mostly ordering stuff for the kids. And then at the last minute, I decided not to give them the toys I bought because they all just smelled like chemicals. And I was like, oh man, fucking weird, unregulated Chinese action figures. Like, this is probably a bad move. Spider-Man, but it doesn't come in a box. You don't get the box for it because is it Spider-Man? Who can say? Like, go look at AliExpress. Go look at licensed goods on AliExpress at some point. It's a fucking trip. And so anyway, I got a few other things. I got like he doesn't wear it, and I don't know if he will or not. He looks like a cute little dude in it. But I bought my son a Spider-Man baseball hat for like $3.50. It was like $4 or something. I was like, all right. And he put it on once and was not into it. But yeah, I don't know. Anyway, long story short, I was buying a bunch of stuff off of that godforsaken website full of bootleg weird shit. And there was a bunch of Transformers stuff. There's always a bunch of bootleg Transformers on there. Some years ago, I bought a bootleg like Soundwave Masterpiece or whatever it was. And was checking that out. And then I saw this. I'm sorry, I'm like trying to open it here as I'm talking. And I don't have a good blade nearby. So I'm using nail clippers to puncture the bubble wrap on this thing. But I bought a case of blind box Transformer toys. These might actually, maybe not. I don't know. I was going to say these might actually be real, but now that I'm looking at the box, I'm like, maybe they're not. Puncturing this thing. And, because they look kind of cool. And I was like, I could use, I don't really have room on a shelf right now to store figures and shit. And it's not really my scene, like decorating the shelves behind me with stuff or whatever. But I did buy this box of blind boxes. Urgh. Because it had what looked like a cool looking Megatron in it. Shining version is what this says. That's not the easiest thing to look at. Yeah, these seem like they're actually these might actually be legit real things. But anyway, yeah, they are, what are these? Blokies figures. Blockies? Or are they blokes? Are they blokes? Or are they blocks? They seem like blokes. And we're cracking the case. We're opening blind boxes. I'm going to open this up and take a look at one of these things. Because I forgot that I had them. This box has been sitting over here for like a week. I'm like, all right. Getting plastic all over the place. Got to be a lot more careful about how you can't just leave like plastic wrap on the floor like you used to be able to, because now there's a baby crawling around and that baby will eat that plastic. Okay, then this box opens like this. And then inside that box is 6 more boxes, because it's a case of 6, I guess. And do these don't, I'm guessing, yeah, okay. So all the boxes have Optimus Prime on them, but I don't think that's what's actually in here. Or maybe it is, but it looks like what we can get is Optimus Prime, is that Prowl, Ratchet, Sideswipe? Or was that Cliff Jumper? Megatron, a shiny Megatron, and a Decepticon Jet in a colorway that I'm not immediately familiar with. 1 out of every 36 is shiny Megatron, I guess. So maybe we'll get the shiny Megatron. The box is a full set with a chance at the rare. Yeah, okay. I thought that would be the case. Cool little box. I don't know. Oh, you really gotta. You gotta destroy this box to open it. It's not like a hey, keep it nice sort of thing. You're okay. Well, whatever. Let's get in here. Let's see what the fuck this is. I want to say it was like $30 for the box. And I was just like, I was in the middle of buying all this other stuff, and I was like, why not get something nice for me? A little something nice for me to look at. Okay, we've got a bag and another bag and some silica gel. Yum. And some paperwork. How much do I hope this is a limited amount of assembly here, because let's see. Let's open this bag. Oh yeah, you got to put this whole thing together. This is Acid Storm, I guess is the name of this jet. Yeah, these are very tiny pieces. Okay. Well, that's a bag of parts. I hope that there's instructions in here about how to snap this together. But I don't know, we'll figure it out. Because I don't think these are not instructions. This is like, you can put a battery in these things, maybe. This is instructions about how to put a battery in something. So I don't. All right. Crotch. So maybe the instructions are just like generic enough that they're like, well, whatever. Because they give you instructions for what looks like Optimus Prime, but it's like joint parts, body, crotch, arm, hands, crotch, and then what's in this other bag? Mm-hmm. Oh, this is like, oh boy. Oh boy. We got hands and stuff and a little base for them to go on. I'm guessing once we're done, a little base you can stand them on. All right. Well, I'll futz with this later, I guess. When I get some free time, build a thing. But really, I've got to find a place to put these where the kids are not gonna get to them, because it is extremely tiny plastic. Cool. All right. Let's see here. Next email. Kyle writes in and says, I was just thinking about Death Row Games and Borderlands Motherfluffin' 4, and I think it would be a funny marketing move if Snoop's game shipped with a parental advisory warning, except at Walmart, where only a clean version is for sale. Do they still do that? I think Walmart still demands clean insofar as, you know, insofar as physical music exists, I guess. I think that Walmart still demands a clean version of albums to be sold there. I guess I don't know. I have not been to a Walmart's music section in a very long time. Do they even have a music section? I don't know. I've been looking, you know, so I bought a new Roku, and the Plex stuff is coming along, and so far as they're supporting more codecs on more platforms, and so, you know, having 4K videos and stuff is more attainable, and so once you start looking through like the Blu-ray selection, speaking of physical media, I guess I just expected that like the movie industry had already just said fuck it and started selling everything in 4K, and it's super not the case. I was surprised that that there are so many 1080p Blu-rays out there, and that all the UHD stuff obviously is deliberately that. But like a lot of movies are not getting reissued. A lot of movies that came out on Blu-ray years ago when Blu-ray kind of first became a thing did not necessarily get reissued in 4K, and a lot of this other stuff is like a weird cycle of some things getting re-released and some new movies coming out, but like it's a weird, like the adoption on it is really strange in terms of what is coming out in 4K and what isn't. And I just kind of assumed that everything new was just always coming out in 4K now, out of the gate, and that, you know, everything was 4K now, but I guess that's not how it works. So I don't know. It's very strange. I guess I hadn't realized that the adoption rate on 4K was just not really there on films either. Like for as much as we talk about like, hey, on in games, it's really, you know, it's not always a thing because the power that you have to have performant 4K games running at a good frame rate and everything is sometimes not worth the trade-off. It's why I talk about having 1440p as a great resolution. It's like right here in front of me. It's literally right here in front of me. It looks great at this range, and I can run it fucking 300 goddamn frames a second in some of these games. And that works great. But yeah, 4K is weird. Obviously, yes, physical media is also super strange because, you know, more and more companies are saying, hey, we're going to stop stocking Blu-rays at all, or DVDs or any of that stuff. And of course, like some companies are going to like, maybe they're not going to even dick around with making Blu-ray players anymore in the first place. And so, you know, obviously the physical media stuff is has been dicey for a good long time, right? Like that's you know, but yeah, that Demolition Man re-release just came out on 4K, and I guess I got to get a copy of that now because it's fucking Demolition Man. Ugh. Demolition Man is such a good goddamn movie. Ugh. So cool that it got re-released, I guess. I don't know. Let's see here. Which version, Pizza Hut or Taco Bell? Taco Bell is the canonical right answer. Rom in Austin writes in and says, I was watching a video of GameSpot's 2004 E3, speaking of 20 years ago, and one thing kept coming up. Everyone was wearing specific sweatbands on their wrists. And at the end of the show, Rich Gallup had a crate of them he was trying to get the passing crowd to take. Do you remember what the story was behind these? It seems like a classic case of a bit that spread through the company that no one on the outside really gets. Do you remember any other E3 merch like this? 2004. So, you know, like, yeah, you would always do, you know, whether it was t-shirts or something, you would try to do something to give out to people that came by your booth, to try to get them into the booth to stay there. Why GameSpot wanted people to come to their booth and stay there, I don't really know. It was always, the salespeople always felt like it was a good show of force if we had a big crowd at the booth. But it's like E3 is not for the public, and we're making shows for the public. So the idea of like GameSpot's going to have, and they did this up until the end of E3, not of GameSpot. That they left all these seats in front of their stage at E3 thinking they're going to draw a crowd. And like, no, dude, people are there to fucking play games, or they have appointments or all of this other stuff. And so no one, like, if you have time to sit and watch a GameSpot live show at E3, you probably shouldn't be at fucking E3. You probably shouldn't be allowed to get in, you know? But 2004, so I'm going to guess here. I'm going to guess that this is probably at least partially my fault. If the reason that these sweatbands existed, these wristbands specifically, that there was a time, and I'm guessing it was probably around this period, but there was a time around here where Ryan Davis and I were wearing a lot of wristbands, like 2 on each arm type dumb shit, just real stupid, just real fucking stupid. And I'm guessing that this corresponded with that. So sometimes the salespeople or the marketing people would be like, we should give something away. What should we do? And sometimes I would end up in those meetings. And my guess is that I was just like, yeah, man, it's wristbands. We should do wristbands. Wristbands are where it's at. This was not entirely, this was probably, if not right around the same time. I was not watching wrestling much at this time, but this was probably right around the start of John Cena's run. And so wristbands were about to be fucking massive in a real big way over the next 2 or 3 years. And so, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I'm guessing that is probably a case of like someone asked us what they should have, and we were like, yeah, wristbands. They're cheap. Yeah, wristbands, and we just went with that. That's probably how that went. There was, yeah, getting into those meetings with the like marketing people, especially for E3, was always real fucking silly. There was the year that they were giving away a car, and they had partnered with, was it Yaris? It was one of those early like fucking hybrid or electric cars, like a Yaris or whatever. It may have actually been a Yaris. I can't remember. Either way, they were like, okay, well, we're going to have a car in the booth and we're going to give a car away. We're thinking, you know, that'd be like a Yaris. Is that cool? And I remember like just being like, I mean, sure, giving away a car is cool, but this is not a cool car. Like, what is this car? Like, this is the type of car, like, some, like, old lady is driving this car around. Like, this is not, like, a cool actual car for people who play video. Like, this is, like, whatever. It's not, like, this is not a cool car. And I specifically said that, like, an old lady would be driving this around. And everyone in the room was real quiet. And then one of the ladies who was in marketing was like, well, I mean, I just bought a Yaris. like, yeah, uh-huh, yeah. So that was fun. Let's see. Steve writes in and asks, was this a disappointing year in gaming? I and the rest of the sickos in the Discord just finished deliberating our own Game of the Year list. When the dust was settled, I was quite happy with our list. When I showed my buddies, though, one simply replied, this was truly a pretty down year for video gaming as a whole. Which got me thinking, was it really? What's your opinion on the year 2024 in gaming? So I don't think it's a down year for games in terms of releases. I really don't. I think that, obviously people are going to like the types of games that they like. And if they feel that they're not being served, then they're going to have a different feeling about the entire year. Right. And so I think that that's pretty, I think that's a bad take. I am looking at this community top 10, this Discord top 10 game of the year. And it looks like as they debated it, what came out of it was, here's a top 10 list. At number 10, Space Marine 2. At number 9, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. At number 8, Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth. At number 7, Helldivers 2. At number 6, Thank Goodness You're Here. At number 5, Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. At number 4, Balatro. At number 3, Astrobot. At number 2, Metaphor Refantasio. And at number 1, UFO 50. I think if you were looking at those 10 games, and their runners-up are Silent Hill 2, Animal Well, and Tekken 8. I think if you are looking at those 13 games, and your reaction to seeing that list of games is, boy, I guess it was a down year for games. What the fuck do you play? What the fuck games are you into where you look at that list of games and your reaction is like, yeah, well, fucking shit year for games, I guess. Like Call of Duty is not on that list, but it was even a good year for Call of Duty. So even if that person only played Call of Duty, like they're doing pretty well this year. So yeah, I don't know, I don't know what types of games you must be playing if you would see that list and your takeaway would be, this was truly a pretty down year for video gaming as a whole. No, it fucking wasn't. Hog Trick says, not that Metacritic is a good measure, but probably this year has the most games in the 85 plus range. Who's left to review those games for Metacritic? Like that's the larger thing there probably is like the Metacritic average changes all the time because publications are folding and also because publications are laying off all the people that fucking review the games. And so suddenly, all the reviews are coming from are coming from freelancers now, and so like you'll have total turnover on editorial strength when it comes to that sort of stuff. So the Metacritic is probably a bad year for Metacritic if you're looking at it in terms of like trying to compare it to past years or whatever, just because of how much the landscape has changed for reviews and who is writing those reviews and all of that other shit. But yeah, whatever. Yes, I think it's a solid year for games. I like I said, I came up with a list of games. My list was about 15 games. And not all of these are like great games. Like the First Descendant is on this list. It's not because it's not my top 10 games. It's not my top 15. It's like, here's some games I want to fucking say some shit about. But like, there are a lot of fucking cool games. There are games that I didn't even really vibe with or, didn't really get into that I still look at and go like, yes, these were good games for the people who like them. Like Metaphor is a game that just didn't really do much for me when I tried it. But it's fucking cool as hell. Balatro, same deal. Like I canonically, if you had to ask me like objectively, scientifically even, to try to remove myself from the process and say what's the game of the year, I think it's fucking Balatro, dude. Like I'm not that's not me saying that's my game of the year. It's not even on my list. I don't especially enjoy Balatro, but it's like it's taken over the year in a big way, and I think it's a game that absolutely belongs at the top of the list. And so, I don't know. There's so many different types of games. Like that's the thing about this year I think when you really break it down and, you know, the different types of games that are in the conversation, I think that's a really impressive spread of genres. Because whether it's Balatro or whether it's UFO 50, you know, relatively smaller games in the grand scheme of things. UFO 50, I mean, I think is a gargantuan undertaking, but you know what I mean. To a game like Indiana Jones, which I think is right up there and is absolutely a contender for Game of the Year. I think if Indiana Jones had been released earlier in the year, that it probably would have made it at the Game Awards, at least into the nominees list. Maybe it wouldn't have beat Astrobot. I would put it above Astrobot in a heartbeat. But also you have Astrobot, also like a you know, and then if you want to get into, you know, more kind of genre fare, you've got Tekken 8, an amazing, cool fucking fighting game. It's a good year for Call of Duty. And so you've got like some big games that did it right. You've got a ton of great smaller games. You've got a Like a Dragon in there. You know, like there's just a bunch of shit, man. There's a bunch of shit that pokes through. Thank goodness You're Here is an amazing smaller game. Just a great, funny thing, man, that deserves to be acknowledged. You have something like a Mini Shoot Adventures. People liked college football. That didn't, I thought that was weird. That was something that like struck me as strange when it came to a lot of Game of the Year talk or like sports specific talk. Not that I went looking for it, so I didn't see all of it. So mostly like the Game Awards and some of this other stuff. But like, the idea that EA's college football game like sold 8 fucking quadrillion copies, and was generally well received on top of that. It wasn't like everyone bought it and went, fuck this. They fucked up college, you know, like it reviewed well. People seemed to really enjoy it. Like, you know, it just seemed like it was well received all around. And then by the time we got to Game of the Year stuff, everyone forgot it existed and just voted for soccer again or whatever. I thought that was strange. I thought that was really strange. So yeah, I don't know, man. I think you'd have to be really fucked up in that. And I don't know. I don't know what types of games you're playing if you're coming away from 2024 saying it was a bad year to play video games. You know? Yeah, the Silent Hill 2 remake came out and wasn't a shit show. That's impressive. You know, they shipped a new Dragon Age and it's pretty solid. Star Wars Outlaws is a hell of a game, even if people got fucking weird about it. I don't know. It's a, even when we go back into previous years, I think, you know, you have games that are getting updated like a Street Fighter 6 or something. Like Street Fighter 6 is still in a really good place. And so I don't know. Like, yeah, Embol says I'm really liking Veilguard. Yeah, it seems like people are really enjoying Veilguard also. You know, Pal World's seen some updates as well, and Pal World had a good run there for a bit. Like, yeah, I mean, this is the year that Arctic Eggs came out. How can you sit here and tell me it was a bad year for video games? Fuck is wrong with you? You should go play Arctic Eggs. Don't lose sight of Arctic Eggs in the conversation around, I don't know, mouthwashing or some of these other kind of smaller, creepier games. Arctic Eggs. Arctic Eggs. Hell of a game. Someone sent in word that Redcon 1, the energy drink brand, is bringing back... I'll click on this. they have partnered with whoever owns the rights to Jolt Cola, and they are going to be selling some kind of new Jolt. If you don't remember, Jolt Cola was, I guess in a lot of ways, the first energy drink. But it was just caffeine back then. They hadn't figured out any other weird chemicals to put in it. It was just like 2 times the caffeine. Like that was how they marketed it. And they marketed it as cool and hip on top of that. And so I, as a child, drank a lot of Jolt. Yeah, I don't know. Redcon is going to bring back something with the Jolt logo on it. I don't know. A deal facilitated by Jolt Cola's licensing agency, IMG. Yeah, it makes sense that just some agency or something would control that. It's not a beverage company that owns Jolt at this point. It just ended up in some IP portfolio as just a logo. We're excited to partner with IMG to bring back Jolt Cola, said Aaron Singerman, the founder of Redcon One. Redcon One is the company that they partnered with Kenny Omega. And they were doing energy drinks there for a little bit. They're on the list a couple of times. Redcon One had some decent stuff. This product holds a special place in the hearts of many, and we are committed to preserving its original essence while enhancing it for today's consumers. Yeah, because you wouldn't, if they just brought back Jolt and said it's cola with 2 times the caffeine, who cares? It's not like we're past that now, man. You got to put some other stuff in your drinks. You got to get some other stuff in there. Maybe my parents shouldn't have let me drink Jolt Cola when I was in junior high school. Like, really sitting here thinking about it, like maybe that was, I don't think that, we'll see what happens when my kids get to junior high, but like these kids have never drank any kind of soda of any kind, and I'm going to keep that going, I think, for as long as I can. Anyway, the reimagined Jolt product will capitalize on Redcon One's esteemed reputation for high performance in its product formulations, delivering exceptional quality and results. The initial reintroduction of Jolt will feature 2 exclusive flavors, available in 16-ounce high-performance canned energy, with future extensions in ready-to-drink pre-workout and energy shots. So Redcon, you know, that's the fucking scary thing about energy drinks today, is that all the companies making the fucking illest shit, they're not the beverage companies. It's not Coke. It's fucking all these pre-workout maniacs. It's all these fucking lunatics selling powders that are just like, yeah, man, it fucking takes 2 scoops of this and then let's go lift. And so they are formulating fucking madness in a can in some cases. And I applaud them. But the idea that Jolt is going to come back and that they're going to make Jolt branded pre-workout that's the world we live in today, I suppose. Terrifying. No word on when the first products will hit shelves. But good on them. I don't know, man. Redcon One, the drinks they made that I tried were solid. So that's the Jolt name is maybe in good hands. I don't know. Jolt is right there with Max Headroom and like that version of 80s nostalgia. And they already brought back Jolt once. They brought it back with flavors. Because originally Jolt was just a can of soda, and it was just a cola. It wasn't anything crazy. It was just, here's a cola with 2 times the caffeine. And that was enough to sell it. That was enough for it to catch on and whatever else. And then when they brought it back, yeah, they did more like flavors and they were doing bottles at that point. And yeah, I don't know. Jolt was cool. Let's see here. Peter from Seattle writes in, and says, I'm playing through the Atari 50 collection, and I'm wondering what you think the first truly great Atari game is. It could either be in the context of the time or modern days. I can see how some of the games would be addictive back then, but maybe don't hold up to modern scrutiny. I can't decide if I think it's Breakout, Centipede, or Tempest. Curious on your thoughts. It's Pong. The answer is Pong. The first great Atari game is Pong. And maybe Pong is a little less accessible than some of the other games because it is only a 2-player game. And so, and playing Pong alone is fucking pointless. Playing Pong against AI is a waste of time. Like, it's stupid. But it's Pong. It's a competitive game. It's the original esport. But playing Pong either on a 2600 or even, prior to the 2600, those dedicated Pong machines that a lot of companies were shipping. But if you can play Pong on a arcade cabinet, that's kind of cool. You don't see a lot of those these days, but Pong is the thing that made Atari make so much money that they were able to get in the business in the first place. So Pong is definitely the first, like, truly great Atari game. Breakout's a hell of a game. I love Centipede. Tempest is a great game too. Missile Command is awesome. I think Asteroids is another, like, landmark game in the gaming canon, if you will. Like, not just Atari, but just games in general. Like Asteroids is a really important kind of point on the map there. But yeah, that's the actual answer is definitely Pong. Andy from Sydney writes in, UFO 50 is an amazing experience, and I have been thinking how crazy cool some games could be if they did a follow-up for a fake 16-bit console, like Super UFO 50. Can you talk about some games or genres from the 16-bit days that you would love to see them tackle in a hypothetical follow-up? Personally, I'd love to see their take on fighting games like Street Fighter 2 or Mortal Kombat, or a true twin-stick Super Smash TV kind of game. Yeah, that'd be hard. If you think about the number of years it took them to make UFO 50 with the limitations of what that console was and everything, I think even scaling those games up to 16-bit gets gargantuan as a task. Games become more complicated at that point too. So in order to make credible fake 16-bit games, you've got to have a big, long, fucking 40-hour RPG in there somewhere. You are making... Those games aren't bite-sized anymore. And it's when people talk about ranking all the Super Nintendo games on the heels of, like, because I'm ranking all of the NES games right now. The thing I always say is that would be awesome. I would love to do it. I would probably, or Genesis. I mean, really, but like the scope and size of all of those games. It's not the number of games on the platform. It's not that, there are a ton of SNES games that came out in the US, whatever. But it is that it would take so much longer for each individual game to be played and ranked compared to 8-bit games that it gets crazy. I mean, ranking all of these NES games is going to end up being like a 2+ year project. And so doing that with 16-bit games where you've got a bunch of long drawn out RPGs, you've got fighting games with a level of depth to them that might not immediately present themselves. You've got just a huge variety of games that are all deeper and longer than their 8-bit counterparts. And so that becomes a much more difficult task to take on. It's not impossible. It's certainly not it is certainly possible. It's not like off the table when it comes to that stuff. Like I'm thinking about it. I would love to do it. But yeah, that's a hard one. And so I think adapting that same argument, I think, is why a 16-bit UFO 50 would be very difficult for them to do. Now, it's always possible that the success of UFO 50 leads to them saying, well, let's put more people on it and let's actually do this. And, and maybe they, maybe they do that. But those, yeah, exactly. Yes. Also, KDR says, 16-bit, you almost get all of the modern controller buttons. And so it wouldn't even really be like the limitations aren't there. You're just making modern indie games at that point without analog. When you go to make 16-bit games nowadays, whereas if you're limiting it to only 2 buttons and this color palette and this and that, like limitations that make sense for an 8-bit era, that kind of limits the scope of your project just enough to make it attainable to actually make 50 of them. And I think that gets a lot harder. Also, I mean, the other thing is like the story of UFO 50, if you will, the nature of the universe in which UFO 50 is set. You would not be able to do that because that company doesn't exist. Or, I mean, hey, maybe the games get sold to a holding company and maybe they churn, you could continue the story in a way, but like it would be weird to it'd be weird. So yeah, I would love to see that also. I think that would be cool as hell. But it's kind of also by the time the 16-bit era rolled around, the types of studios that were making games and making a lot of games, it wasn't really the same as it was. Like when we look at the NES and we look at the history of British game development and a lot of stuff there, you see a lot of those limitations, and you see a lot of these prolific studios that were able to ship a lot of games, like Imagineering, who shipped a lot of terrible video games on the NES, or Rare, Rare, extremely prolific, quality a little all over the place on some of those games. But they had some very, very high points, of course. But like, yeah, the kind of the way that those studios were prolific then, they were not able to be quite so prolific in the 16-bit era because those games took longer to make. And so, just the nature of like, hey, it's this system and this company made these games for the system, blah, blah. Like even that part of the story, the universe of UFO 50 changes so much when you adapt it to a 16-bit era that it's you wouldn't make Super UFO 50, you would make Super UFO 10 maybe, and it still might take you 8 years to get it done. Someone said do a handheld one. That is kind of a cool idea. But the color palette of like if you were to make a fake Game Boy and do all of that stuff, like if you were to make a fake Game Gear, that thing is too close to the games that are already in UFO 50 to really be that different. And so you're just imposing like a bullshit resolution limitation on those games in a way that would just make it suck. And so really you would be making a fucking Game Boy. Like if you were really going to do that, I think you would make these monochromatic games. You wouldn't make it color. And I think that probably limits the audience a little bit, but I think that would be the more interesting limitation on scope as opposed to, if you were making a fake Game Boy Color. But then at that point, you're just making Pico 8 games or something, like there's enough fantasy consoles out there that like, it's kind of already happening. Just go make some Playdate games or something at that point. So yeah, it's they picked like I hadn't really thought about it, but now that we're talking through it, it's like they picked the exact right era to riff on for UFO 50. Because if you go too much further forward, the games get too complicated for it to be like credibly make sense. If you go too much further back, the limitations become genuine limitations and not just like fun, conceptual limitations. So yeah, I think that maybe just gets a little hard. Grant writes in, yeah, I mean, this is kind of what I was getting at. I mean, this is sort of the same thing restated, but we'll at least read it. Grant asks, is gaming really that bad today? When people say the worst game of a year is Saints Row or Suicide Squad or Conquered, gaming is in a pretty good state. I remember as a kid in the 90s getting a game for Christmas and completing it in a couple of hours, or maybe the game was just broken or unplayable like Bubsy 3D, which was my best mate's only game he got one Christmas with his PlayStation 1. Could you imagine getting a PlayStation 1 for Christmas and the only game you had was Bubsy 3D? That's like terrifying. That's like the first two sentences of a horror story. Now we just have people nitpicking about the slightest stutter that most people don't notice. Go back to the N64 where we were playing GoldenEye 4-player at 10 frames per second. I think what people really mean is that hardware evolved so fast and it allowed for new ideas and genres to be made constantly, whereas today it feels like everything has been done and we're just remixing it. Yeah, you could maybe make an argument that that gaming has entered a period where a lot of the genres are starting to become sticky, and and a lot of the big games are kind of inspiring more direct clones in ways that sometimes it does feel like everything has been done, but I think that goes out the window when you really dig into a lot of the smaller games that are out there. I think at a big game, big budget level, yeah, you do see a lot of similar ideas. And a lot of those big budget games, like think about Spider-Man 2, which I don't mean to pick on. It's a game that comes up a lot in a lot of these conversations about AAA games and the scope of them and everything else. But if you think about Spider-Man 2 and think about what you really do in that game and the act of working your way through that story. Now, the technology enables Spider-Man 2 to be this big open world and to be this big thing with, not a lot of load times and, and it looks fantastic and everything. But there are a lot of ideas in those games, the nuts and bolts of playing those games. I think a lot of that stuff you could trace back to let's say PlayStation 2. Some games I think you could trace back to the PlayStation 1. But when we think about modern gaming as something that started with the launch of the PlayStation, polygonal gaming and all of that sort of stuff, the idea of just yeah, you're a dude in an alleyway punching dudes. Now, the way you punch those guys is obviously influenced by something like Batman, which came out some number of years later. And so, I'm not saying something as simple as Spider-Man 2 could be a PlayStation 2 game. It's not that simple. But you could tell that story on a PlayStation 2. You could have some of that style of combat on a significantly older piece of technology. In fact, I mean, you could go back to the Spider-Man games that existed in that era, and there's some, pretty impressive stuff on display, even so far as swinging. I would say that, in some of these cases, you're going to say, okay, these games aren't open world games anymore if you're scaling them down that dramatically. But the core of it, the core of a lot of the mission design, the core of a lot of this sort of stuff, I think that's the sort of thing that hasn't always changed all that dramatically. Open world games, I think, are still kind of, some have vehicles, some don't, right? But I think that you still see a fair amount of Grand Theft Auto 3's influence on open world design in a lot of the games that came after it, in terms of like how they control where you can go on the map when, or what types of side missions. And every one of these fucking games has to have a racing game. If it has cars, then they're car races. If you are a fucking weird hyper mobile character, then you're fucking swinging or flying through a bunch of rings. You know what I mean? Like that sort of stuff still exists. I don't necessarily mean this in a bad way, because gaming takes influence from previous games. This has always been the case, you know? I mean, sometimes even in contemporary situations, you know, we talk about all the GTA clones that came out after GTA got hot, but like, go back and look at all the fucking maze games and dot eating games and everything that came out in the wake of Pac-Man's popularity. It blows away any of that shit. Like, it is a crazy number of games. They were coming out very fast because obviously dev times were very different back in those days. But you had a ton of games that were either cloning, you know, as like some of them were just straight up bootlegs of Pac-Man boards, and they were modifying Pac-Man boards to have different mazes, and you end up with like Hangly Man and all of that bullshit. But then you end up with something like Ladybug or Lock and Chase or some of this other stuff where they just like, oh, we have a minor flip on this. And then when you get into the computer scene where it's even more lawless, you've got even more, you know, you got your Jawbreakers and your oh shits and yeah, all of this other stuff. And so like the very idea of, you know, a clone of a game, you know, we saw it again in a massive way with Doom. I think, you know, like you have Pac-Man, you have Doom, and you have a lot of this open world stuff, which is maybe kind of the next point on that graph. Maybe there's a first person shooter, maybe there's like a Halo clone somewhere in the middle there that you sort of look at, but like, yeah, that's just kind of how a lot of this stuff has always been. And so I guess I see why, you know, when people are fed up with the state of gaming today, I think it always has to be a very limited take on where games are at. You know, when people say, oh, the games are all the same now, or games were better before, or whatever, I think they are just looking at AAA. I think they're looking at the big budget games that are coming out, which is fair, you know, like, but because I think that space has been kind of pulled apart, like not entirely destroyed. Let's call it decimated in the actual description, the actual definition of decimated, that it's, you know, but yeah, I do think that like AAA isn't what it used to be, and you know, that's because of how expensive those games have become and how the scope on those games is out of control. And it didn't necessarily need to be this way, but it is. And I think the question that a lot of studios are going to start to ask themselves when it comes to making games at that level is, can they put that genie back in the bottle? Can they cut things? Can they reduce the scope of their games and still charge $70 for it? Can they get away with it? Do they think the consumers will notice? If Spider-Man 2 had 20% fewer side missions in it, would anyone give a shit? I maintain that Miles Morales is the best Spider-Man game that they have made at that studio, because the scope of it is reined in a way that it feels attainable. It is fun. The story fucking moves. It's got a great pace. It's not this gargantuan sprawling thing the same way. But like far and away, I think from like a storytelling perspective, which is, you know, maybe not exactly what we're talking about here, but Miles Morales is easily the best of those three games. And I like that it's reined in. I like that it is something that, again, it feels very attainable. Like, I think that when you start to add all of that shit, all of that side stuff to your game, you know, it waters it down a little bit. Like, even if you're not going to do it, like some of that stuff just doesn't need to fucking be there. Like, I mean, really, I don't want to sit here and say games should be smaller and they should charge the same amount for them or whatever, because I don't think it's that simple. It's more the question of, at what point are you just making stuff for a like very hardcore subset of your audience that is going to kind of be there no matter what, because they've already signaled that they'll put up with anything. Does the world of Spider-Man through those games, and then they, by using the same, by using the same city, they saved some money there, I'm sure, by having roughly the same layout across those games or whatever, right? That probably helped them a little bit. But like, what if that city was 20% smaller? Would anyone notice? Some people would, for sure. But would enough of them notice, and would enough of them go like, this feels small? Like, what would the reaction be if that game had come out and not been as big of an overall environment? But also, how much money would that have saved? I mean, ultimately, like that's sort of the thing is it's not necessarily the assets and the graphics and all of this other stuff. It's like, what if you reined in the scope on these games and didn't spend a bunch of time recording VO for a bunch of side missions that most people are never going to see in the first place? Like, if you start looking at the data, and I don't think we get to good places by being overly data driven. Letting data drive artistic decisions is going to lead to mediocrity. There was someone, I think it was on the Discord yesterday, people were talking about Nike and how Nike has fallen off so hard because they became an overly data-driven organization, and they started making data-driven shoes that were mediocre, that like technically met everyone's needs, but they weren't cool. They weren't cool at all. And so using a lot of data to make those types of decisions, yeah, Netflix, another great example of like data-driven fucking horse shit. The idea, there was a thing going around yesterday that like Netflix was asking whether it was screenwriters or just like people on the shows that they're making to be like, could you write more dialogue that is that people are explaining what they're doing as they're doing it? Because a lot of people are going to watch this show, but they're not going to be looking at the TV. They might be looking at their phone or looking at something else. And so if you could, in the script, make sure that you're saying it out loud so that people can still follow the action, then that would be good. Like that is some end of the world type shit from a creative perspective. I think that is some fucking like nuclear fucking, we are past some point of fucking no return. But there's something to that at the end of the day. And so, you find what is the middle ground of like, okay, we need to make sure that we're looking at the data to make smart decisions, not to make the decisions for us. And so that's why when this conversation came up again, because IGN of all places decided to wade into the yellow paint on the ladder fucking discourse like 2 years too late, which is like, fuck off. Like, why are you wasting your time with this bullshit? Data would indicate that players get lost. That stuff exists for a reason, because they focus test games and they go like, oh, they couldn't figure out which ladder was the one they could climb, versus like as these environments become more realistic, then we end up in a situation where, hey, maybe these doors should open. I don't know. But no, we want them to go one way, and we can't spend the money to render what's in behind all these fucking doors in this city. So yeah, we have to fucking figure it out. We have to figure out a way to guide players through these environments. All of it goes back to the Gears of War shit. This goes back to Cliffy B saying, yeah, no one looks up in these games. So we had to make a button that when there was something cool on screen, you push the fucking Y button and the fucking view cranes over so you can see the cool thing that's happening up there, because in our testing, no one saw it. That's just smart design. You could argue that like, oh, putting the yellow paint or putting paint on everything is a sloppy, lazy solution or whatever. Like, sure, Yes, you could find a variety of ways to what the new mission in the First Descendant. They put a splash of mud looking whatever. It's not yellow, but it's enough to let you see like, oh, I can climb this. So I don't think that there's any real issue with that stuff, because I think that there is enough smart data, player experience data of people watching people play their game and getting lost over the years. We have over, when did Gears of War 1 come out? We have fucking like 15 years of fucking data that says that players still don't look up, that players will get lost. So, me being colorblind, like that's an even crazier thing. So like, games used to do, and some of them still do, they'll do doors with lights above them, and some of the lights above the doors are red. I check every door because I don't see the colored red very well. I'm mildly jealous of people that get to just like see like, oh, that's the door that works because it's got a green light above it or whatever else. None of these red doors are going to open. We know that already. I check every fucking door. Maybe that's why I'm so good at finding secrets. I don't know. But yeah, I think a lot of that conversation is super stupid. Because I think that like so much of it is backed by real world experience and real world data at this point. Video games need to convey information about their environment, and this has been a very effective way to do it. Again, you could argue that like maybe the yellow paint is becoming a little bit too like it's too many games are using it in the exact same way, and that maybe other people need to come up with their own visual language for conveying this information and not just lean on that in a, like, oh, we'll do this because this other game did, like maybe they need to figure out their own thing. I don't mind it at all. It has never bothered me a single time. So like the people that are yelling and screaming about this just seem like they seem like fucking morons. They seem like the fucking like the lazy game dev crowd that just don't know shit about anything and just want to be pissed and make their angry YouTube videos about how games are bad now. Games are bad now because they're made for idiots. It's like, no, like, okay, like I went down that was me in fucking 1994. That was me when Myst came out. That was me when people were celebrating Myst as the future of video games the same year that Doom caught on and became a big deal. Trust me, you don't need to worry about this shit. It will work itself out. Everything will be okay on that front. But also try to remember that these are commercial products and they are trying to sell the maximum number of copies possible. And that there is a big push to try to get more people into games, not less. And so you're going to see these attempts to try to make games a little bit more friendly for people who haven't been playing games for 20 years. And if, putting a little yellow paint on a ladder or whatever is going to make it so fewer people get lost and more people see more of a game at a time when no one finishes any meaningful single player game at all ever, go look at these achievement percentages. They need to do what they can to try to get people to see that content. And I think all of this is part of the same conversation. Go look at the achievement percentages on modern single player games and see how many people got to, like a game that well enough to know like where in the story this trophy pops or achievement or whatever. And go look at, a modern Xbox game, go look at a God of War game, a recent God of War game, and like look at how many people finish those games. Go find the easiest one you can and see how few people are actually making it through those games. Try to pick a game that has not been on Game Pass or has not been available for free, because those are going to skew the numbers down. A free game, people are going to load it up and go, okay, cool, I'll get to this later, whatever. And that's going to be a player of that game that doesn't have any trophies or achievements, and it'll drive some of those percentages down. So, you know, if you want to try to be fair about it and try to look at this stuff, I would try to avoid games on Game Pass like Indiana Jones. And try to avoid games that have appeared on PlayStation Plus recently and stuff like that. Jasper says, I was surprised that Jedi Survivor has almost 50% completion on the finish the story achievement. Wow, that is high. That's crazy. So like, yeah, so you'll see those and you'll see just like how few people are playing any of this content. And so that's why when I talk about like, who's going to notice if you cut half the side missions out of this game, and that's stuff that probably would actually save money in development, because you don't need to go and write all of the dialogue for these side quests. You don't need to go record all the VO for these side quests, you know, whatever assets you're making in there, there's that too. But like, that's not time spent on that stuff. But you have to have some of it. You can't cut it all, right? Otherwise your game's going to feel very sterile, overly linear. And that might be a bad thing too, right? So I think the thing we're going to see, you know, games that are entering production probably over the last year or whatever, like I wonder if this is going to be a time when we start to see more developers, especially on larger games, start to think about those sorts of things. But I think, you know, the yellow paint discussion or the you know, like that sort of stuff, I look at that as that is aimed at getting people on to the next thing. Climbing ladders in video games, not actually exciting. Just tell me which one to climb up so I can go get to the next part of the game that matters. It's okay. You don't have to fucking like make 9 videos about it, about how mad you are about it. Like it's fucking crazy. And so, yeah, I wonder, you know, if it's going to be a situation of like, okay, we're gonna find ways to shuttle players onto the next meaningful content, and have just enough side content to reward exploration, but not so much that it feels like a crazy checklist of a billion different things that you don't necessarily want to do. I think those are really hard lines, and I think we'll see. You know, if developers really do start to pursue that, I think some will get it wrong. Some will cut too much, and we'll have games that feel like, oh, this felt a little light for a full-priced game. And we'll have some studios that cut the wrong stuff, and you know, like it's not a science, and that's why so much of the data-driven stuff is fucked. But corporations are not set up to do anything other than be data driven, because it's a bunch of middle managers that don't want to put their reputation on the line. They don't want to have to put their trust in someone and say, I believe you will make this company money, and so I am going to fund this. They hate doing that. They would love to be able to point to the numbers and go, it wasn't me. I didn't greenlight this thing. I instead looked at the numbers and said, absolutely not. I told Jeff he couldn't hire anybody because the numbers told me to. You know, that sort of stuff. You know, you want to make mediocrity, that's how you do it. You fucking don't put people in charge. You don't put trust in your fucking people. And, you know, this is how it goes sometimes. So yeah, but a lot of that I think comes back to the, you know, hey, yes, games are art. Because it sure as shit ain't a fucking science. Not to say that there's not plenty of math involved in fucking keeping your frame times up and optimizing, and, you know, there's plenty of room for that stuff. But at the end of the day, there's a whole lot of art in this fucking thing. And there's a whole lot of just middle territory of mucky, touchy-feely stuff that makes great games great. You don't fucking science your way. You don't spreadsheet your way into Game of the Year. So I don't know how we get there, because obviously it's not like the world is becoming fucking less corporate and more trusting of people in these positions. So I don't know how we get there for these big budget games. It really is, it is companies that have to put their faith in a person leading a team and go like, we think that, the proven track record here, like it's very easy. Well, I shouldn't say pretty easy because I don't know him and I don't know the situation, but I imagine it would be pretty easy for a guy like Todd Howard to make his case for like why he needs the budget he needs for a game. And I'm sure that they draw it out and get meticulous about it the way you have to nowadays. But if there was anyone that you were going to say, all right, we'll give you a little more because he's got a track record, and because he's got a reputation, because he's got this, it's why Sony would probably feel comfortable saying, okay, Neil Druckmann, we will let you make your space game. We will let you have one. And then you're back on the clock for the thing we want you to make. But we'll let you make your space game. We trust you. We trust that this will fucking not lose us money. Because, he's got that track record. Because Naughty Dog overall, it's not just him, it's the whole studio, has a track record of making this stuff and making it incredibly well in ways that people like. And so, I think it's easier for people in those sorts of positions where they, they're able to. It's maybe the one benefit of that kind of auteur effect of like you are a person associated with a studio is that you hold a certain amount of sway even internally in some cases, unless everyone internally has seen through your bullshit. But you are able to hold that kind of sway and say, yeah, no, I am that fucking guy. You do need to give me this money. You do need to let us make this game. And we're going to fucking knock it out of the fucking park. It's why you have to, the thing that Mike Tatum, biz dev, back in 2008, it was when I was trying to get Patrick Klepek hired. There was a conversation around like, well, what do you think he's going to bring to us? Like, what do you think he's going to do? If we hire this guy for this amount of money, what's going to change? And I had not been used to being asked those sorts of questions. So I was like, fuck, dude, I don't know. Like, we're going to be able to do more fucking cool shit because he's fucking cool and we know he can report well. And we like, he's fucking rad. Like, we'll bring him into the fucking fold. It'll be fucking great. It's like, okay, but like what? Quantify it. What do we get? X number of news stories on the side. What do we, And so, but really what he was getting at and what he eventually says, like, when you're advocating for this sort of stuff, you literally, you need to put your nuts on the fucking table. You need to fucking say this. No, I fucking believe in this. I back this. You can't fucking hedge and be like, well, I think this is going to happen. You'd be like, this is what we're fucking doing. And this is why I need this amount of money to bring this person in. And even if you're wrong, as long as something comes out of it, it's fine. You can always pivot after the fact and make it work. And it goes, when Patrick came on, it was very much like, well, we want to get into news. And this is the guy. He is literally the fucking best person we could hire. If we want to do this, this is absolutely the fucking dude. And then we brought him in and, he started doing quick looks like everybody else. It's, because it was a nightmare, because that was the factor. We fucked it up. We fucked it up from the get-go in a lot of different ways. But like we ended up getting he did a ton of great stuff. And he also broke some news along the way. Like we didn't go build a big news team, which I think was originally, it was like, okay, we're going to build a big real news organization around Patrick. And we're going to have different writers doing, we're going to figure this out. But instead it became like, no, we're going to have Patrick for the big, like he's going to still chase news as best as he can. But like really we're going to, he's also going to become a part of this family and do the same stuff that everyone else is doing. And so the initial idea of like building a news thing immediately kind of went out the window. That's the thing. Like, honestly, if there was a thing that we were the worst at It was that. It was hiring people for things and then them just becoming like everybody else. And like, okay, like at a time when what we really needed was people that lived behind the camera and only did production stuff, every single person ended up on camera. Every single person ended up, doing more or less the same type of thing instead of hiring people specifically for production roles. And it's because they were too good. They were just like they were too fun to not involve in some of this stuff, and because a lot of them had different tastes in games, and so we got to cover a wider array of games because we had these people there that were able to do it. And so that was cool, but it ended up meaning that as we hired people, it didn't make anything, it didn't free up anyone else's time to pursue bigger things and different things and whatever else. And so you end up kind of hamstringing yourself in the long term because you're not evolving, because you're just like, okay, we're bringing in these people and like, all right, you pull up to the table. We've got more than enough games to go around. Instead of being able to pursue anything different. And so that's, I don't know, that's kind of a thing, but, anyway, long story short, yeah, gaming's fine. I don't know. The idea of getting a PlayStation 1 with just Bubsy sounds like a criminal act. That sounds like a terrible situation. Last question. Patrick in Maryland writes in and says, do you remember the Windows disk defragger? Nobody defrags anymore. It was so satisfying watching the little colored blocks change. All UI has been downhill since then. Yep. I love defragging a drive. The defragger is in there still, but you shouldn't use it. And you can still run the trim or whatever on an SSD, but yeah. Yeah, no, you're right. All UI has been downhill. Watching the defrag was always so satisfying until it would find a bad block, and then you'd be like, "What the fuck is going on? Oh my god!" We're ruined. Take this drive and shoot it full of holes and throw it in the garbage. All right, I'm gonna get going. That's it. 2024 is officially over. I hope everyone has a good New Year's tonight. If you're not already in part of the world where that has happened, or maybe you're just listening to this the following day, in which case, hi. We're here from 2024. It was a weird year. It was a taxing year in a lot of ways. But I'm excited about the new year because there's just for weird reasons that are yeah, there's a lot of yeah. It's been a real stressful year here, and I'm hoping to kind of get out from under some stuff for next year that will help. That will help with a lot of stuff, but yeah. I will be here on Friday to rank some 8-bit Nintendo games. Not going to be here Wednesday because that's New Year's Day. I'll hang out with the family, and do some stuff then. But you will see me on Friday. We'll rank another batch of games. Head over to the Patreon. Sign on up. There's never been a better time to sign on up at patreon.com/Jeff Gerstmann. If you join the advisory panel, you can pick games for the Friday show if you are so inclined. But yeah, thanks everybody for being here. It's been a real whatever. It would take another half hour for me to, I feel like I've talked about how stressful and how fucked up this year has been, on my end of things a lot here, but I want to, some stuff has changed, and so that'll, we'll get back to normal here. Yeah, I will see you on Friday for that stuff. Take care.